Sorry for the delay, long executive session. I will call us to order. Welcome to your council work session, June 4th, 2024. David, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, everybody. We have a number of employee recognitions, so we'll jump right in. I'll call on William Johnson, our Assistant City Manager. He's going to recognize a number of folks.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I want to start by, just commending the city, the council for its continued investment in our people, our resources, our recruiting, our training, especially as it is in our especially our commitment to public safety. I believe that as of this date, we have some of the finest first responders in the state of Texas. We had recently an employee who suffered a life-threatening event at the Bob Boland. And a number of people who have come here today, most of them I was gonna call up, but it looks like most of them are already up here. Chief Davis, Chief Noakes, if you'll come up to the stand. We just wanna recognize them because in the middle of that event, these people jumped right into action and literally saved one of our own employees' lives. And he is actually here today. I think Terrence Parker is also here, right? So, yeah, so, Chief?
Mayor and Council, Neil Noakes, very proud to be the Chief of Police for the Fort Worth Police Department. My friend and colleague, Jim Davis, is here as well, Chief of the Fort Worth Fire Department, and you're looking at two proud chiefs today. On May 16th of this year, Officer Terrence Parker was at the Bob Boland Public Safety Complex, and he suffered a massive heart attack. He was unresponsive for 15 minutes. He was basically dead for 15 minutes. Fortunately, we had some officers that located him when he was down on the ground. They began life-saving measures immediately while one of our officers ran to grab Fort Worth Fire Department personnel. They came over, began to administer more advanced life-saving efforts. MedStar was called. We had paramedics for MedStar, or as Jim tells me, we are to refer to them now, and rightfully so, the newest members of the City of Fort Worth family. They all treated Officer Parker on scene until MedStar transported Officer Parker to the hospital. And although he was clinically dead for 15 minutes, later that evening, same day, he was up, around, alert, and cracking jokes. And you can see today, you would not know anything happened to him. But if not for the first responders that day, we would be having a different conversation. We protect life. Rarely do we have a situation where we're protecting the life of one of our own, and that's exactly what happened. I'm gonna keep my remarks brief because I wanna name every single person that was involved because they deserve recognition. From the Fort Worth Police Department, obviously we have Officer Terrence Parker, Sergeant Chancey Pogue, Detective Jeff Lucio, Detective Thomas Vilk, Corporal Alec Wiseman, Officer Arthur Williams, Officer Trenton Hill, and Officer Roxana Farron. And I meant to have you all raise your hands as I called your name. We'll start with the MedStar personnel. If you will, please raise your hand as your name is called. Paramedic Briley White, Paramedic Kyle Sonderer, EMT Rachel Samuelson. And from our brothers and sisters in the Fort Worth Fire Department, we have Lieutenant Jared Goad. Not present, but still deserving of recognition is Lieutenant Jacob Pennell, Lieutenant Gary Presbaugh, Engineer Chris Davis, Firefighter Dane Edwards, Firefighter Quentin McMillan, Firefighter Jason Macias, Battalion Chief Greg Dykes, Lieutenant Mark Driggers, Lieutenant Josh Scarborough, Engineer Marquise Robinson, Firefighter Shane Newkirk, and Lieutenant Brent Sanderson. I cannot tell you how proud I am of all the first responders who jump into action to do exactly what they needed to do to get the job done. And because they did, we have a Fort Worth police officer who is still here today because of their actions. Chief, did you have any words?
Thank you. I would just add real quickly that this is what demonstrated today. But then the system goes on to transporting to a hospital, and not just a hospital, but to the right hospital. And these are hospitals in our community that are prepared to take care of people with life-threatening cardiovascular events, which is where he was transported to. And that system continues there with the emergency department care, and then getting out of the emergency department to a cardiac catheterization lab where a clot is pulled out of his main coronary artery, one of the main coronary arteries in his body, in his heart. So then the rehab, and then the continued care in the community that you're going through now in order to rehab your ill heart. So the point is that it takes a system to come together, and on this particular day, the city of Fort Worth, the Fort Worth Fire Department, the Fort Worth Police Department, and MedStar were a small part in a chain of survival that the reason this man's here today. And we are all very thankful for everybody that was a part of that.
Thank y'all all for taking the time, and apologies that each of you have very important jobs and we left you waiting over an hour longer than you probably anticipated. I'm sure the outside is covered up in emergency response vehicles because all of you are here to be recognized today. To both chiefs, thanks for taking the time to do this. It's what it's all about. And we're glad that they're here with us. And I mean, it's a pretty amazing story and a good reminder that every day is precious. That's absolutely true. So, absolutely. Give him the look.
Hi. Well, I got to say thanks to everybody that's here, all these guys. I'm still here today. So training works. Training is effective. I'm a prime example of that. For those that thought that maybe they could push you to the side, you know, hey, CPR, I know a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Dive into it, because you may be the person to save somebody else's life one day, just like everybody else here did mine. I don't know what else to say. You got something to say?
That was perfect.
That was
Thank you.
And I think we're shifting, right, David? We have a few
Yes.
people. Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank y'all very
on
much
that.
for being here.
Next, I'm going to call up Dana Bergdorf. She's going to recognize some employees as well.
All right, thank you. Thank you, David. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm excited to have this opportunity to highlight our partnership with Visit Fort Worth and the Fort Worth Film Commission. As you all know, the commission was established just under 10 years ago, and they've worked with hundreds of projects, generating over $500 million in economic impact to Fort Worth, as well as supporting nearly 20,000 jobs. So it's increasingly become a very important part of our economic development strategy for Fort Worth. So one of the things we've done is obviously Mayor and Council support, city leadership, but also it's been important for us to make sure that our city departments are engaged in helping to make sure that the process of filming and doing business here in Fort Worth is supported and streamlined, just like we do with our other economic development initiatives. So I was thrilled when we had Mitch Witten, Jessica Hill with Visit Fort Worth and our Film Commission reach out and say that they wanted to recognize a few City of Fort Worth employees for their assistance in the filming here in Fort Worth. But first, I'd like to bring up Bob Jamieson, our President and CEO of Visit Fort Worth, to say a few words. And thank you for making your way through the crowd, Bob. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dana, and thank everybody around this table and your predecessors who, for the last 10 years, have been tremendous supporters, not only of the work of Visit Fort Worth, but this particular endeavor, Visit Fort Worth, the Film Commission. It's hard for me to believe that it has been in existence for 10 years, and it started just, recognizing that film production work was taking place in our community, but without anybody advocating for them, holding hands through whatever process they were trying to get through. And some people persevered and endured and figured out how to get what they needed done, and other people went to other locations. But we formed the Film Commission, and really today is about recognizing the partnership that exists between the City of Fort Worth and the Film Commission. There's some very special contributors on city staff that are worthy of that recognition. My part is just to call up Jessica Hill and to make sure she gets recognized for her part of the partnership, because she has been a remarkable leader for this endeavor, and she has not only forged these great relationships with people in City Hall, but with partners all throughout the city and with those clients that we have that are doing all sorts of film production now at levels not even imagined when we began this. So Jessica and Taylor Hardy, who works with her, both of them are just, they work tirelessly, and there's a distinction to be drawn between the work done by our Film Commission and other communities, because these two really work to solve problems and to answer questions. They're not just helping to fill out forms. They're not just handing out, here's a phone number, here's who you call, but they are engaged in every step of the work they're doing on behalf, and that builds confidence and it builds relationships, and that's why people have been coming back time and time again. So Jessica, you're gonna do the recognition of our friends at City Hall.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Dana, thank you so much for your leadership and your support of the Film Commission from day one. We really appreciate it. It's been a big part of our success. So thank you all for this opportunity. Film and television productions utilize our local hotels, restaurants, parks, and retail, and they require street permits, parking permits, road closures, and the support of Fort Worth Fire and PD. The Fort Worth Film Commission's goal is to attract projects here and then support them once they're in Fort Worth, making sure they have all the resources they need to build community connections and create a film-friendly city. Film productions require a lot of problem solving, and Fort Worth has become known as a city that makes things happen for film, television, and commercial production. This is in thanks to the support of our city partners in development services, permitting, Parks and Rec, Fort Worth PD, and Fort Worth Fire. Your swift responses, care, and collaboration have given Fort Worth the reputation of being a yes town. The Fort Worth Film Commission and Visit Fort Worth would like to recognize the following individuals for their contributions to the film industry in Fort Worth. Charles McClure, TPW. I know Charles can't be here today, but Charles has been getting probably daily, if not weekly, emails from Taylor and I for the past 10 years, and so he's used to seeing our name. He has been a huge support to the Film Commission. He's helped navigate major street closures, including the takeover of several blocks of the stockyards during the filming of 1883, and most recently Landman and Special Ops Lioness. None of this would be possible without Charles's support and his guidance on these major projects, so thank you, Charles. Evelyn Vasquez, TPW. Come up. Evelyn's prompt responsiveness and attention to detail for every film application is greatly appreciated. Because of her timely care and collaboration with Charles, Fort Worth is getting a reputation for having some of the quickest film permit turnaround times of any city. This is a huge deal in the film and television industry because every minute counts, and that quick responsiveness has really made such a huge difference. So thank you so much. She also gets daily emails from us, literally. Peter Elliott, TPW. Peter has been involved with the Film Commission since day one as well. We greatly appreciate Peter and his team's collaboration and quick response times. As many of you have seen, major productions require a lot of parking for equipment trucks and crew members. Peter and his team have worked closely with Landman, Lioness, and every major film and television project that's been here in Fort Worth. We appreciate your responsiveness, your support, and your collaboration. We couldn't do it without you, so thank you, Peter, and your team. Corporal Paul Ufkus, Fort Worth Police. I know he can't be here today, but Corporal Ufkus has gone above and beyond to support literally nearly every film project we've had in Fort Worth since the start of the Film Commission, including Miss Juneteenth, 12 Mighty Orphans, 1883, Lawman Bass Reeves, Landman, Special Ops Zionist, You Gotta Believe, and countless commercials and music videos. Production executives have shared that Corporal Ufkus embodies Texas hospitality and is a joy to have on set. Sandra Youngblood, Park and Rec. Sandra was also there with us from one of the very first meetings we had when we said we're going to get together and start a film commission. She and her team are always quick to respond, collaborate, brainstorm, and find out creative solutions for filming in city parks. Her partnership has allowed us to pitch locations like Sampson Park to double as a medieval Europe and David Lowery's The Green Knight, to transform Gateway Park to a 1930s football field and 12 Mighty Orphans, and to showcase the Fort Worth Water Gardens and music videos with Kendrick Lamar and Solange. So thank you so much for all of your support in helping us showcase Fort Worth. In addition, 101 Studios has identified 45 Fort Worth police officers who have been instrumental in supporting 1883, Lawman Bass Reeves, Land Band, and Special Ops Lioness, and so we look forward to recognizing those individuals soon. So thank you all again for all of your support in making Fort Worth so film friendly. Thank you.
Jessica, before you go, I just want to say thank you to you and your staff at Visit Fort Worth. As we've started filming more in our neighborhoods of the city, you've been so communicative with our office. So we make sure that we're letting our neighborhoods know that this is coming and they're not taken by surprise. The only thing that I would request that you do moving forward is let us know when those shows air so that we can go and watch our city on the big screen.
Absolutely.
Thank
Thank you
you
so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jessica. Good to see you.
Thank you. Now we'll call up our Jessica, Assistant City Manager, to recognize a number of folks here.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I've got 3 different recognitions to do. So this first one is a pretty good sized group of employees. So I'm going to call up all of our UTA MPA graduates to come join me. Are they in the room or are they still outside? Can somebody check? Okay, now we're coming in. All right, well, they're coming in. Let me tell you a little bit about this distinguished group. So this past May, the University of Texas at Arlington Fort Worth Center graduated the first cohort of city employees from the Master of Public Administration program. We started 35 employees in the program. We did lose 1 from the program along the way, and then we had a few employees that left employment. Don't be shy, y'all, come on down. There's a lot. It's okay. Y'all just line up and then we'll recognize in a minute. So ultimately, we graduated 29 employees within this group. A little bit of background on the project. This group of employees started this program in August of 2021. They have committed many, many, many hours of independent study, but also class time at the Fort Worth Center to get this done. And then most recently, they completed what is called the Capstone Project, which is the final class of the MPA program. And as part of the Capstone Project, they were split off into smaller groups of 5 to 6 employees, and each group was assigned a research and report project that was picked by the city management office based on a number of project proposals from our department heads. The capstone projects were absolutely timely and important projects, and they are things that we are using as we move forward. One of the projects was to evaluate the city's land acquisition needs and potential partnerships, both internally amongst departments and also externally. They looked at the wellness and employee benefit programs. They evaluated safety program enhancements that we need. They looked at the public information request process and how we manage those requests. They also looked at the review of the emergency management department and operational structure. And then lastly, they reviewed the information technology product delivery methodology. And they really did a top-notch job. As part of the conclusion of the capstone project, not only did they do a lot of work over the semester to research and put a report together, but they then presented their findings to all of the department heads in early May. I am extremely proud. So my MPA is also from UTA, so I know what they did, but I'm extremely proud of all their work. Not only did they work full-time and still balance all of their family obligations, but they committed to getting this MPA degree done as well. I am going to read out the names of the employees that are able to join us today. We do have a few that were just not able to be here as well, and so we missed them. When I call your name, please raise your hand for me. The first employee in the water department is Eduardo Aguirre. We have Agnes Bonsu in water, Leticia Cordero in environmental services, Victor Escobedo in human resources, Veronica Gary in diversity and inclusion, Elizabeth Garza in police, Juan Gonzalez in IT, Mary Hannah in TPW, Rashad Jackson Stegall in TPW, Christy Lemon in Fort Worth Lab, Bianca Lord, Financial Management, Claudia Martinez, Municipal Court, Allison McNamara, Public Events, Kenneth Naley in PARD, John Padine, Financial Management, Juan Paredes, Municipal Court, Avery Pesic, Environmental Services, Ryan Poehler in Economic Development, Evan Roberts in Development Services, Jennifer Roberts in Development Services, Seneca Roderick Kinley, Municipal Court, Jennifer Snyder in Fire, and last but not least, Michelle Swindle, IT. Please join me in congratulating all of these employees on their graduation. Thank you all. Does anybody want to say anything fun about their experience? What they loved most? They're just glad to be done. Yeah. Thank y'all very much. All right, next up, Patricia, will you put that slide up for me? Thank you. Next, I'm going to invite Amy Connolly to come join me. All right, next up on the list, I was here before you about a year ago recognizing two of our employees that were named to the top 100 influencers by the Emerging Local Government Leaders Organization. It's quite an honor to be named to the top 100 leaders or influencers list in the United States. And once again this year, we have two more employees that were recognized for their leadership. Amy Conley in Neighborhood Services. She is the Assistant Director of Neighborhood Services. You all know Amy. She has been with us for how many years now? 5 years now, and just done a tremendous job leading numerous efforts within the organization. Tiana Thompson could not be here today, but you might remember you saw Tiana Thompson at your last council meeting when she was here receiving the Public Works Week recognition as well. Tiana is a Public Works Senior Capital Projects Officer. She's also very involved in the Public Works organization here locally, and she just does an outstanding job of keeping a lot of project details together and keep them on track and moving. So please help me congratulate both Amy and Tiana for their recognition as Top 100 Influencer. All right, last up on my list, I'd like to invite Kyle McClure with the Parks Department up. Perfect. Kyle has been named as the new Assistant Director of Parks and Recreation for the Golf and Athletics Division following a nationwide recruitment. We had more than 100 applicants for this position, and Kyle was actually internal to the city of Fort Worth, so we are incredibly proud of him for stepping up into this role. He did an outstanding job through the interview and recruitment process and really just rose to the top as the best candidate for this position. He previously served as the District Superintendent in Athletics. Prior to working for the city of Fort Worth, Kyle was the Director of Operations for the Village Dallas, a resort living community in the heart of Dallas, and then he also worked for the city of Richardson in athletics and recreation. Kyle received his master's degree in sports management from Baylor University, as well as his undergraduate degree from Texas Tech University. Kyle and his wife have their hands busy these days with their toddler Harrison, and he enjoys spending his time with family cheering for his beloved Red Raiders and playing golf very poorly, is what I'm told. I have not witnessed it. But Kyle has a heart for public service, and he looks forward to providing greater access to programs and facilities for all residents. Please join me in welcoming Kyle. And Kyle, if you would like to say a couple words, just pull that microphone up so we can hear you.
Thank you all for having me. I look forward to working with each of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'm going to call up Mike Crum to introduce a couple new employees in his department. Maybe not new employees, promotions in his department.
Y'all can stand here at the fat podium. I'm going to go to the skinny podium. Mayor and council, good afternoon. We start today's introduction with a question. Do any history buffs out there know the name of the first general manager of the Will Rogers Memorial Center? Hands, please. Okay, hearing none, in 1936, Amon Carter and other city leaders tapped Miss Hazel Hayes, the city manager's secretary, to lead the Will Rogers operation. Now, Miss Hayes must have been pretty good at her job, as 3 years later, a local publication featured her in a 1939 article entitled, "Women Auditorium Managers Like Jobs, Do Business Without Profanity or Cigars." With or without profanity or cigars, 88 years later, we close the circle on female leadership at Will Rogers with the appointment of Allison McNamara as Public Events Department Assistant Director and Interim General Manager of the Will Rogers Complex. Allison has a strong public events and equestrian background. She began her city career 18 years ago at Will Rogers and advanced through the ranks from event coordinator to accounting technician to operations manager at the convention center. She has a degree in animal science with a focus on equestrian studies from Mississippi State University. And as you just heard, recently received her Master's of Public Administration degree from UT Arlington as part of the city's cohort of master's degree candidates. Allison is a problem solver and a team builder. In the single month she has been on the job, she has already knocked out a long list of programmatic repairs, equipment replacement, and streamlined processes to improve operations at the 17-building, 120-acre complex. Assisting Allison in leading the Will Rogers team is Claude Humphrey, who steps into the role of Senior Operations Manager. If Claude looks familiar to you, it's because he's been working with the venues managed by Public Events since many people in this room were born. Claude started his career at the Tarrant County Civic Center in the 80s. Think about that for a minute. Sticking with the facility through the transition from county to city ownership and management, ultimately landing on the leadership team at Will Rogers. In 2022, Claude was honored by Visit Fort Worth with their Above and Beyond Award, which honors the Hospitality Industry Employee of the Year. Together, Allison and Claude will lead the Will Rogers team in 24 and 25 as the facility transitions from public to private management. Please join me in congratulating Allison and Claude on their new leadership roles. Allison, if you want to say anything, go right ahead.
Thank you. Like Kyle said, I look forward to working with all of you.
Thank you as well.
Thank you. Now we're going to shift to informal reports, and we have a number of them. The first one up is the 2024-2025 Action Plan for the Use of Federal Housing and Community Development Grant Funds. And Casey Best is available if there are any questions.
Councilmember Beck?
I have one question, and it's specific to the CDBG housing programs dollars. Our general admin cost for this program is $1.4 million, and that's almost double what we are actually spending in programmatic delivery to that program, and that seems out of alignment with the admin cost and all the other programs. So can you explain why that is?
And the admin cost for the CDBG is based on a certain percentage that we get to assign to those costs. And so it's just based on the dollar amount that we receive from CDBG.
Oh, so it's not actual costs associated with it? I'm just concerned because we're spending about $1 million on the program and 1.4 on admin cost.
Correct. And it's just based on the assigned percentage that we get. The admin cost, it includes our staffing, and it includes all of our CDBG funds, all of our CDBG programs. And I have Sharon Berkeley here as well, who can help.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Hey, Sharon.
Good afternoon. Yes, ma'am. The maximum amount is 20%. That's set by HUD.
Okay.
So our CDBG allocation was 7 million for this current year.
Okay.
20% of that is the 1.4
So
million.
it's a percentage of all of
All of them.
CDBG, not
Percentage.
just the-
So y'all had it in a separate,
Yeah.
in a little separate chart, so it made it look like one program
What line item are you
was
looking at,
doing that.
Elizabeth?
It's down CDBG Housing Programs Project Subtotal, so that's all, that's why. So, but it's for all the
All CDBG funds, correct.
okay, all right, that makes much more sense. Thank you.
Thank you. The next informal report is the 2024 debt plan, the rating outcomes, and the bond pricing results. And Reggie Zeno is available if there are any questions. All right, next informal report is the adoption of new neighborhood empowerment zones. And Sarah Odell is available if there are any questions.
I'd like for Sarah to explain how this came about, especially the time factor, the schedule, what expired, what's good, and how it benefits communities. I'm just giving you time to get there. Sarah is the queen of the NESs, so thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, you want to know the timeline of?
Yeah, how this came about and what happened that we find ourselves here today. I know that there were some that expired, so you want to talk about that and how things are okay now?
So the city adopted the NES program originally in 2000. Over the years, there have been several changes to the program that have been made. The largest change was in 2019. At that time, we terminated 23 neighborhood empowerment zones and adopted 6 large neighborhood empowerment zones. At that time, we decided, and the council approved, that the neighborhood empowerment zones would be effective for 5 years. And at the end of that 5-year term, that we would look at the boundaries again. During this time, the CDBG maps also changed, which is a qualifying factor for drawing the boundaries for the neighborhood empowerment zones. So the neighborhood empowerment zones that were in place expired at the end of January of this year, and now we are adopting the new neighborhood empowerment zones.
And can you provide, just in your own words, how this benefits our city as a whole, especially those neighborhoods where these NESs will exist?
Yeah, the Neighborhood Empowerment Zone program is the only program that lets homeowners have any kind of break on any city fees, including their permitting fees, or have a tax abatement on the improvements that they make to their property. It covers areas that are community development block grant eligible. So that is the biggest factor in determining the neighborhoods that could be a neighborhood empowerment zone. It also assists our small businesses and multifamily, commercial, and industrial programs as well. And it's kind of a one-of-a-kind program in the city.
Thank you.
Sarah, it looks like from the map you provided that there's only a few areas that were removed from the NES. Is that correct?
Yes.
What was the major factor generally as to why those areas were removed?
Those areas were removed because they are no longer community development block grant eligible.
Okay.
Nothing else was removed out of the NES. Quite a bit of area was added to the NES areas. So we've gone from 42 square miles to what we're looking at adopting is 60 square miles.
Okay. And just out of curiosity, if you look in what looks to be District 11, it's right there at an intersection near Wilbarger, Village Creek, Martin, that area on the map. Do you remember off the top of your head why that had dropped off, what development had been going on there?
Why that dropped off
From being removed from the NES?
No, I can't speak to that because the community development block grant eligible maps are federal maps.
Right, I'm just curious as to.
So, yeah, they're
I'm
put out
surprised,
by
I
the
guess
federal
that's the
government.
one area
Yeah,
I'm surprised
there were
about.
some surprises there.
Yeah, okay.
Definitely, but I can't really say what. I know it's affected by the census. So maybe Fernando can explain a little more since I don't do.
Madam Mayor, I believe you're referring to the industrial district around Sun Valley and southeast Fort Worth. And I believe Sarah, we deleted industrial districts.
No, we ended up not deleting industrial districts. The only thing we deleted was areas that were no longer community development
Okay.
block grant eligible.
There's a large industrial area in southeast Fort Worth that is
And that's why
proposed for
they come
deletion.
out. Okay, yeah, that's helpful. Thank you both, appreciate it.
Absolutely.
The next informal report is on child care services and academic progress, and Fernando Costa is available if there are any questions.
I don't know why he's tried to sit down.
Mayor Pro Tem Bivens.
Thanks to the mayor, this topic is very important to me now. It hasn't always been, but I think that the general population would appreciate this type
Yes,
of
ma'am.
update.
You've inquired about the quality of childcare services and how that quality contributes to the academic success of children who receive those services. And as it happens, Child Care Associates recently commissioned a study by the School of Education at SMU on the performance of child care programs in Tarrant County and specifically in Fort Worth. And the informal report that you've received provides a summary of the findings from that study. It looks at different measures of child care program performance as it affects the physical, social, emotional, and cognitive development of children who receive child care services. And the findings are a mixed bag. They found, for example, that on some measures, roughly 90% or more of the Texas Rising Star certified child care programs met the high quality threshold for those standards. But on other standards, roughly half or even fewer of the programs achieved the high quality level. And I think while we have much to celebrate in the quality of our child care programs in Fort Worth, we can also acknowledge that we have room for improvement, particularly in respect to workforce. The post-COVID workforce crisis has affected all kinds of employers, but perhaps child care programs to an exceptional degree. And that can be attributed to a host of factors, such as relatively low pay. Many of our child care professionals are working for $12 to $14 an hour. That is not competitive in today's environment. And the annual turnover rate for child care workers tends to be as high as 40% or more. That's exceedingly high. And as a result, many child care programs find themselves moving teachers around to satisfy the required student-teacher ratios. And that instability has an adverse effect on the performance of children receiving these child care services. So that's a brief summary of a more complex report. We encourage you to take a closer look at it for further information.
Is Kara here?
Ma'am?
Is Kara here today?
Kara Waddell is CEO of Child Care Associates. I don't see Kara, but I want to acknowledge her help in providing us with this information.
When you look at the study commissioned by Child Care and Associates, done by SMU, what is it that the city can do to help with this situation? Since when you take a look at it overall, children are at stake, which means eventually communities are at stake. People being able to make good livings for their families become jeopardized. So
Yes.
what can the city
Well, I can
do?
think of nothing better than what our own distinguished mayor, Mattie Parker, has done to elevate public awareness about issues affecting childcare in Fort Worth and the connection between the performance of our childcare programs and the ultimate success that children experience in school.
Yeah.
Mayor?
And I just think we've already done a lot, you know, the CDBG prioritization and working with neighborhood services, putting some of those funds towards facilities, which is often an obstacle for high-quality childcare Chris knows all about that. The most recent vote we've taken to abate property taxes, which is a small amount of money, but to a lot of these businesses, it really allows them to put those monies back into the classrooms to help them. And then lastly, these are big lifts that we're working on with our largest district, 4th ISD, and others to make sure they're creating it's a partnership opportunity that TEA allows where they can really draw down additional money in these early childhood classrooms. It's a complicated model, but thanks to CCA and others, I think we're on the right track. And we just invited Mike Morath and Brian Daniel from Workforce Commission to Fort Worth. So we're leading the way in a lot of different aspects. So this council should be commended on supporting those efforts. Because to your point earlier, this is not something we control, but it is absolutely something that impacts the daily lives of residents that live here and has a propensity to be incredibly long-lasting positively for our citizens. So thank you, Fernando.
You've used American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA funds to support the development of child care facilities.
And the county should be commended with their recent
Yes.
distribution of money, over $40 million that went towards child care as well. So.
And just one last question from staff. For those independent operators who may be watching, listening, or even be here today, who would be a good point of contact for them to reach out to if they just didn't know who to call?
There is no greater resource in Fort Worth in respect to child care programs than Kara Waddell, whom you've already mentioned as CEO of Child Care Associates. She is not, recognized not only locally but across the state as an expert in the field, and nobody is more generous with her help and advice than Kara Waddell.
Thanks for elaborating on this.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right. Our next informal report is on commercial ownership of single-family residential properties.
We've got some
And
questions.
Christiane Simmons is available if there are any
Councilmember
questions.
Beck?
I don't have any questions, but I would like to see, when reading through this, y'all identified 183 resident-owned properties, and 154,000 and some change had the homestead exemption. But in those that didn't, y'all identified people who probably are eligible for that homestead exemption. And so what I would like to see is us communicate with those particular residents and let them know that that exemption is available to them. I think people are used to getting notices from the city to pay taxes, but I think we should also make sure that we're giving them notices that they have some tax relief available to them as well.
Councilmember Hill.
I do have a question. Well, kind of a statement to you. So when you say commercial properties in the IR, it reads as if they're commercial properties operating a commercial business. And I think just for the general public, could you clarify that that's not what this is intended to represent?
Right, that's not exactly what this IR is for. Not operating as commercial properties, but we're defining commercial properties as properties with owner names that indicate commercial ownership, and then properties that don't have a homestead exemption. So those are the assumptions we're making when we try to say, is a property occupied by its owner or not?
Okay. And how does the city utilize that information?
I don't know if we've utilized this information before. This was just a request. I don't actually remember where it was born out of, if it was in QRC or something else, but we're responding to a request that someone made, and we're just using TAD. This is actually only Tarrant Appraisal District, and we use April estimates to just sort of make some assumptions about perhaps the percentage split that's going on.
Thank you.
My question, or maybe just a comment, is I think there were a few news stories after this posted on Thursday that were a little misinformed about what the actual data is telling us. And you were pretty clear in the IR that despite the fact that it may be tagged as commercial, it may be an LLC that's owned by one individual that lives here and it's a rental property next door to their home. That's quite different, and especially if it's rented and available to residents that live here in the city of Fort Worth. And so I think it may be helpful if Renee and his team put out a community, city news story to make more clarification about what this looks like. I just think there's a lot of heightened awareness around housing affordability, especially in the state of Texas and in Fort Worth, and there needs to be. And I think we all should be concerned, especially when you hear many stories across the country of large hedge funds purchasing entire swaths of neighborhoods. And we do have some of that in Fort Worth. However, I don't think it's systemic, and it's something we should be aware of. And the way we can parse this data to be more mindful in the future, I think would be helpful to our residents. And sometimes these IRs kind of get out in front. And so this may be helpful to even do a full presentation in the future. If this is something we think is useful as we're watching to see if we see troubling trends around the purchase of homes that for a commercial purpose, or rather from entities that don't have the same interest as some people that actually live here. That makes sense. Council can respond to that. Gina?
Yeah, I just want to add this. Christiane, you do a darn good job all the time.
Yeah.
But this was not what I expected to see. And I hate to mention this, but I did see more information on a similar study coming out of Dallas County. And so, that was very embarrassing. But when I take a look at what's happening in parts of our city, people have no idea who's buying up these properties until you find out that you're living in an area where you may see 10 or 15 cars to a two-story house. And so I think we need, I know we need to dig a bit deeper to help our people, in the city of Fort Worth. It is very disturbing. I hate that Jared's not here. I know that he was very concerned about this as well. But this was really not the meat I expected to get from here. No slight to you, but there is more information that other cities are doing, more studies, and we need to be just as aggressive in digging for the benefit of our people here.
That's fair, and perhaps, sorry, Councilwoman Nettles, I was just going to say, I know that we have a follow-up item on June 11th at the NQRC, and it's a little bit backwards, but maybe we can look between now and next week at how we can beef up based on the examples that you're giving, and we can also work on a city news, explainer or clarifier with Renee's group. Councilwoman Nettles, sorry about
Yeah,
that.
and I was just going to say kind of what you just said. I mean, this did come out our committee meeting. Dr. Williams and I and others were concerned with affordability homes being available in the city of Fort Worth, with many residents moving from Dallas and all coming to Fort Worth. And a lot of these homes are not available because they're owned by commercial and they're rent homes. And so I think to what Gina was saying, and also Mayor, is we may need a better presentation of how many homes are in our neighborhood that are owned by commercial, that are renting homes instead of home ownership. And then also, as well as what Elizabeth said, about making sure that those who are have homes and don't have the homestead exemption, that we notify them so they can get that exemption, I think will be very good.
Okay.
And I look forward to that presentation, NQR, whatever you call it.
And it may just be in the context of what we can and can't control, right? You can't control this, but I know the legislature is actually looking at this issue specifically, interim charges. So maybe if we level it on the legislative front, that helps. I mean, otherwise you're just talking about something you can't do anything about, so.
Sure. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'll just add to, thank you, and I know this is a snapshot of a point in time too. I think what you're not also, and y'all are the data experts and can figure this out, I know a lot of people buy homes as LLCs and then flip them, so they're selling them and putting them back on the market. So I think that's also worth noting, that when you put a snapshot point in time, 26% or whatever the statistic was, that might not also be accurate. I don't know how you look at that, but I'll leave that to the data experts to also parse that as well.
Yeah, that might be right. And if this is a trend we want to keep an eye on, which it sounds like it might be, then we can look at some of that more longitudinal sort of point in time, to see how it's ebbing and flowing. Certainly. Okay, thank you.
All right, next informal report, squatting laws in Texas. Matt Murray is available if there are any questions.
Wait a minute, didn't you skip over something? Yeah, 24.
Oh, did I? I sure did. Let me go back. Before we get to squatting, registration policy for community organizations. And Michelle and Renee Tays is available if any questions.
I brought that up, and just to make sure people remember why I brought it up, I was very concerned about the interaction we have with these so-called neighborhood alliances, and who and what entities can we influence and partner with. My office was denied access to a virtual meeting of I think it's called the Neighborhoods of East Fort Worth, and I took offense to that. And so I think if you're going to be an alliance and you consider yourself connected with the city of Fort Worth at some point, then there should be a relationship. So that's the premise from where I'm coming from.
So some of the recommended changes that we are putting forward have to do with issues that have come up, like the one you just spoke to about alliances. We've also had some other instances with neighborhood boundaries and some of the current policy that we have that makes it unfair to residents if they don't want to join a new association. And so we tried to look at all these issues that we were having, and we also looked at what other cities were doing and tried to come up with some recommendations for the changes that you see in the IR. Specifically when it has to do with alliances, what we've started doing is that when an alliance submits their update, their annual update, they have to list all the organizations that are members of their alliance. We now contact those organizations to confirm that they have agreed to be a part of the alliance. And if not, then we tell the alliance they have to be removed from their document. And one of the recommendations we have on the alliances is that we currently draw geographic maps to represent the alliance. And what happens is sometimes you'll have a neighborhood, sometimes a very large neighborhood within that area, and I think this has happened on the east side, where that neighborhood association has not agreed, but on the map it looks like they're included in the alliance. And so one of our recommendations is that we start listing the organizations that are in an alliance and not have it be like a geographic map that's representing them. Because if you look at what an alliance is, it's organizations who have come together for a common cause. And so we think that by listing them, we're really showing that it is an alliance of organizations and not like a geographic area on the map.
Well, I can appreciate you standing up here. Where is Renee? You're taking the brunt of this, and you're doing a real good job. But I'm not going to tiptoe around this. And my next question is to City Legal. Just so you know, Leanne, we had a conversation with Sarah before you became city attorney. And at that time, we felt that alliances were becoming unwieldy just because they were claiming associations that said, no, we are not affiliated. What does legal say about an alliance denying access to meetings to the council office? That is not right.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of, from a legal perspective, that an alliance is not like, for instance, an HOA where it's required by law that they follow something like an Open Meetings Act type thing. So it's a little bit different. I would think that there would be advantages to them to have council representative in some way there, but from a legal perspective, they're not required to follow the Open Meetings Act and have it be open to anyone that they choose.
Well, I'll be looking into ways to make sure, they say membership has its privileges. I think affiliating with the city of Fort Worth, there are privileges there, and there should be some type of requirement to engage, or we need to just say bye. And so I'm pretty sure this is the only alliance, where you see this behavior taking place. And I'll be following up with that and talking with you with very serious conversation, because that should not, it makes no sense that would happen. I don't know when their next meeting is, but we'll try to crash that one too.
Any other questions?
Yes, I do. Michelle, just out of curiosity, I draw a distinction between an alliance formed of associations and an alliance formed of HOAs. In what you have here, is that distinction present? Meaning in your assumptions and your recommendations here?
Right now, we don't make any distinction between alliances that are comprised of neighborhood associations or HOAs or a combination of them.
Okay. I think that is necessary. And what I would recommend, because this issue has happened before in the past, I know when Dennis Shingleton, was District 7 council member at the time, this came up with the North Fort Worth Alliance. I think, Macy, you might be aware of it too. And there was some discussion about it, right? And I think in talking to Renee, he was aware, of that. I think we need to kind of bear down a little bit and get some input, at least from those two alliances, because they're among the most vocal, right, in our area. But I understand Gina's point of view as well. I mean, I would be very upset, if I was denied access to, neighborhood group, within the council district. I mean, it's all part of our outreach. So, I understand, her point of view as well. This may be a topic, and I know it's an ongoing discussion we have from time to time. Support and training, okay? I'm just looking at this list right here. The benefits of being a member, right? Support and training. In the past, I know that the city was able to provide things like bylaw, training and et cetera. And my understanding is we're still trying to get back to having that capacity, correct?
Yes, we do. When a new association is forming, or if there's maybe new officers that have come in, we do provide sample bylaws and help walk them through that process. So that is training that we still provide.
All right, because I think as recent as last year, I had an organization that had undergone some leadership change and some membership changes that approached my office and asked for help on bylaws. Now, I've done bylaws before for organizations, but, you know, that's not, you know, possible for me, you know, given the other, you know, things that I have to do. So I referred them over to the community engagement office, and I was told we can't do that. So just to clarify, can we do that now?
Absolutely.
Good, that's good to hear. Okay, so we're improving in that regard. Just to kind of wrap it up right here, overlapping boundaries for associations. I had a similar situation occur, you know, in my district about that you had not necessarily overlapping boundaries, but inscribed boundaries. You had an organization that popped up right in the middle of a long existing, you know, association. And for whatever reasons, that new one refused to be part, you know, of the existing one for whatever reasons. And that's different, you know, in my view, you know, of overlapping. I mean, they're inscribed. So what about that scenario?
So one of the reasons that we address this is because, and it has not come up very often, but it did come up recently. And we had a new association that wanted to form. And so the way our guidelines or our policy is written right now, you draw a map and then you have to get 50% of the people within that map plus one to form the new association. If you do that, then that is a new association. So if you have the 49% who do not want to belong to the association, by our current policy, they belong to the new one. And so when this instance came up, people were very vocal about not wanting to be part of a new association that was being formed. And we felt, since they're voluntary neighborhood associations, we needed to really look at the way our policy was written and try and come up with another option. And so we looked at what other cities had done and came up with the suggestion of the overlapping boundaries. If you have an area where people want to belong, there are people that live within that geographic area that choose to belong to two different associations. And it's not an ideal situation, but I feel like the 50% plus one is forcing people into a new association that they might not want to belong to. So this was just a suggestion to try and address that part of our policy.
Okay, I'll have some follow-up questions for you because I can think of a few scenarios, but in the interest of time, you know, I'll save those for later, but thank you.
Mayor, I do have one more question, and I'd like for Renee to come to the microphone. Renee, this is easy. I'm good. Can you talk about your overarching vision on using social media to strengthen the bonds of neighborhood associations, as well as how they operate for the general public? Because most people who live in neighborhoods are not members of associations, just like churches. So how do you propose to use social media, your Twitter and stuff?
Yeah, it's an overall strategy because we know no one person gets all of their news from one place. And so particularly our analytics show that younger folks tend to get their news from social media. We follow our social media platforms very closely, and we look at the analytics on the backside to see every week we get a report on what does well and what our residents want to know about. I can tell you offhand it's a lot of nuts and bolts. It's road closures, it's work of the city that does well within our social media platforms, but it depends on the platform and in the audience that we're trying to reach. And so with our neighborhood associations, for instance, we know that they're very tied in to the
Next Door.
Next Door that Michelle's team actually gets to run.
I just got banned from Next Door.
You're 0-2.
I just got back on Facebook thanks to the mayor.
You're 0-2, Gina.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Awful.
And so Yeah, within our social media platforms, we look at the analytics and try to write toward what is doing well. And then we have to be able to balance that across the news of the city in 25 different departments that all are kind of appealing to us as to why they should be in city news, as to why they should be featured in social media, as to why they should be in Nextdoor.
Thank you. And Mayor, all of this to say to your listening and your viewing audience, if you live in Fort Worth, and I know you do because you're watching us on cable, you ought to know at least the name of your neighborhood association. And that way you can get engaged, be informed, because if you're out there on an island by yourself, you have no idea what's going on. And so I encourage membership in neighborhood associations, but not ones who are part of big alliances that don't let council offices participate. So.
And I would want to give a kudos to Renee's office in communication because it may have been the swimming pool, but I think I was tagged in the post or shared the post, and comments started coming in. And before I could comment, Fort Worth had already commented on the answer to those questions. So we really appreciate you guys coming to residence, and I mean, you guys are on it. So I do want to give you that.
Another thing we've started doing is for some of our neighborhood associations, the liaison who's assigned to that has been asking to join their Facebook page so that she or he can post things directly on that page in addition to pushing it out on Nextdoor. And most of them have been very receptive to that.
And to your point, Chris, I have been working with the team that posts on social media to create the persona of how we want to answer those in a respectful and nice way. So if we post a new initiative and the pessimist says, fix the roads before you do that, then like we're starting to be able to reply on how much money we spend on roads yearly and how we repair roads and refer that back to city news articles if they want to learn more so that we can be on that.
Okay, we're back to squatting laws in Texas. Matt Murray's available if there are any questions. All right, moving on. Stormwater criteria manual, floodplain ordinance, and grading permit ordinance updates. Stephen Nichols is available if there are any questions. Stephen? Come on up.
While we're waiting on Stephen, I really want to thank TPW staff for taking on this effort and really coming up with some proposed changes to the way that we do it. I think our Linwood neighborhood is a really great example of what happens when we don't enact these new changes, and it's small incremental development that on its whole ends up being very dangerous for some of our some of our residents. The only question that I have is why the new regulation would apply to fences.
That's a good, so first of all, thank you for having me, Mayor and Council, I appreciate it. The new regulation would apply to fences in that if you have water racing down a hill and you build a fence, like a privacy fence, it's effectively impervious to that water. You may divert that on your neighbor.
Okay. Can we, as part of this program, maybe get with Development Services and offer some, maybe some examples of what fencing that would allow water to move through that wouldn't require this? Because I want to make sure that we're being safe, but fencing does seem like it's small, and I get why you want to do it. And a brick wall is very different than, say, a chain link fence. And so if we can maybe have some examples and work with some industry leaders to provide that to residents so they can maybe find a way out of that specific to fences.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
I think I would want to note too that most fences don't actually require a permit unless they're over 7 feet.
Okay.
And so the majority of backyard fences won't actually be captured through the permitting process.
Okay, thank you.
And there are fences too that have like concrete footings. That,
yeah.
That's what I would think. Yeah.
Thank you. Next informal report is an update on the redevelopment of the Community Arts Center, and Fernando Costa is available if there are any questions.
Councilmember Hill. Fernando, will you please just give us an update on the project?
Yes, ma'am. You'll recall that almost exactly a year ago, the City Council adopted a resolution accepting the findings and recommendations of the 1300 Gundy task force, which called for redevelopment of the city-owned property at 1300 Gendy Street in the Cultural District, the property currently housing the Community Arts Center. And pursuant to your guidance, the staff from the Economic Development Department issued a request for proposals. We received the proposals from 4 different firms. A committee comprised of 2 task force members and 3 department heads reviewed those 4 proposals, selected 2 as finalists, and invited them to submit final proposals, which were the subject of public presentations. They submitted actually multiple iterations of those proposals, but ultimately neither proposal satisfied all of the criteria that the council had prescribed for redevelopment of 1300 Gendy. So we're going back to the drawing board. This is a matter of some urgency for the city, and we intend to proceed in a timely way to attract appropriate investment in 1300 Gendy that would be commensurate with the high standards that we associate with our cultural district. And so we ask the public to stay engaged and work with us as we seek a suitable solution for this property, because as you'll recall, it was as recently as 2 years ago that the city commissioned a structural conditions study on the building at 1300 Gendy, and found that at the time the estimated cost to repair the building was in the ballpark of $26 million. In today's dollars, that would be well in excess of $30 million. And we're holding our breath because on any day, major systems at the Community Arts Center could fail. So this is not the situation that we can allow to continue indefinitely. And so we're seeking a solution that will be broadly acceptable to the community. And I know that our council members and our esteemed mayor are engaged in this challenge every day.
Well, I want to publicly thank you for your
Yes,
time
ma'am.
and effort, because I know you've spent a lot of time and effort on this, and not just with the public, but also with the task force, and also
Yes,
want to
ma'am.
publicly thank them, including my predecessor, Leonard Firestone. And I want to reassure our constituents, specifically the arts community, the cultural district, that we know this is an important project, and we know that their time is of the essence, but we only get one shot to make this right.
That's correct.
And it can be a world-class facility and really in the heart of our city. So I want to reassure everyone that this is a priority for me, and I think it's a priority for the council and staff as well.
Thank you, Councilman Hill. Very timely comments. This process has been as challenging as it has been, in large measure because the city council has taken it to heart. You have taken seriously the charge of finding a suitable use for this property, and you have listened carefully to what the community has told us, particularly folks who are users of the Community Arts Center. They have spoken passionately about their expectations, and the council has responded by saying that we want to preserve what's important about the Community Arts Center. We want to preserve access to space where artists can grow and develop, and whether it occurs at 1300 Gendy or elsewhere, we want to find a place for artists in this community. And we want to develop this property in a way that meets the community's expectations. And so thanks to your leadership and the leadership of your predecessor, former Councilmember Leonard Firestone, who chaired the 1300 Gendy Task Force, the leadership of Mayor Parker, I could go on. I think we can reasonably expect a positive outcome to this process. Thank you, ma'am.
Any other questions, council? Thank you, Fernando.
Our next informal report is on crime-free multi-housing program, and we have Chief Aldridge and Brittany Jones available if there are any questions. Come on up.
Chief, while you guys are coming up, one thing I'll be looking for, probably not in this report today, but I want to see what the staffing looks like, because what I hear from people is, this is a great effort, but understaffed. And I also want to know about what happens when you have an apartment complex that's the source of numerous complaints, but we haven't made the case yet for a nuisance case, if you will. How do we track those after training has taken place? And who has taken the training? How many complexes have taken the training? And how do we follow up? And so those are some details that I'm interested in.
Absolutely. So before we get started, I have Officer Brittany Jones here. She is the sole and only person dealing with crime-free multi-housing.
That was my next question.
Yes,
staffing.
ma'am.
Yeah.
So prior to April of 2023, this program kind of has been neglected. And so, we hadn't done some things for quite some time. We brought Brittany over. She has done a phenomenal job turning the program around. If you would indulge us a little bit, I'd like her to give just a couple of minute highlights of this IR, because this IR is pretty lengthy. But I think she'll be able to give a pretty good overview. And then if she hasn't answered your questions, we can definitely take those questions at the end.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So in 2014, we passed the crime-free multi-housing program into city ordinance to address violent crime, drugs, and gangs in apartment communities. For phase one, every manager, assistant manager, and anyone that can execute a lease with 8 or more units in the city of Fort Worth has to attend an 8-hour training within 6 months of being hired. At least one person from the property each year has to come back for a refresher training. During the training, we encourage them to use the crime-free lease addendum that states that a resident, one of their household members, or a guest cannot engage in criminal activity on or near the property, which includes disorderly conduct, Class C assault, drug paraphernalia, any Class A or Class B misdemeanors, or any felonies on or near the property. During phase two, if they violate their crime-free lease addendum, it could lead to a 24-hour notice of vacate to be issued. During phase two, they have to go through a CPTED inspection, which is crime prevention through environmental design. That is conducted by code compliance. Then they also go through a light inspection with the assistance of the MPOs and Code Blue, and a daytime inspection to check for minimum safety requirements. During phase three, they have to go through a safety social, where the property manager plans it with the assistance of our crime prevention specialists and MPOs. This meeting is held to bring the residents together to talk about crime and crime prevention, and allow them to meet each other and build trust with the police. After they've completed all 3 phases of the program, then they're certified in the crime-free multi-housing program until the next year. We currently have, as of August 2nd, 591 people who have came through the program. 277 apartments are currently going through the phases.
One thing you might think about is inviting the council person when these socials take place. I'm looking at 2 neighborhood presidents who are very active on the east side of Fort Worth, who have single-handedly gone in and done the work of code and police on occasion without license, but to a very good end result, and I know you know who I'm talking about. But it would be good to know, when those take place, and that way the council office could appear and provide some additional information about engagement.
Absolutely, yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, who's getting arrested? I mean, somebody's got to be getting arrested, I'm sure. What are you finding, I guess, is a more sophisticated way of asking.
So I'll let Brittany kind of cover the stats if you have those. I will tell you, we kind of started because it was neglected for so long, we started in Las Vegas Trail. And the reason being is because we had that neighborhood improvement program going on there. Yeah. And it kind of coincided pretty well with them because of the large number of apartment complexes they have. And so, prior, I think you saw in the IR, in the previous 10 years, we've had 0 citations. And that's pretty troublesome, right? Because we know that not all apartment complexes are doing what they're supposed to do. But since that time, Brittany's, done a really good job. And if you can share some of the stats, that you've done.
Sure. So from January of 2024 through March of 2024, the West MPO's team has done a phenomenal job of really enforcing the program in the LVT area. Sergeant Owen has went and helped deliver 18 violations to get those people that have committed a lease violation aware, I guess, that make the apartment managers aware, and they went and issued the notices. They also had about 40, due to the relationship they built with these apartment managers, because they're going to all the meetings, they were able to arrest 40 people on criminal trespass, and 70% of those led to higher felony charges due from that relationship they built.
So one thing that we're doing, because Brittany is, a one-person show, is we're trying to use the MPOs as force multipliers for us, that we can train them in this training program. Prior to Brittany getting there, the training program by the apartment managers had to be done in person, which means the crime-free multi-housing officer had to give that training program. We have since transitioned over to an online program that allows them a little more latitude and be able to reach a lot more people a lot more quickly. So now it's just a matter of getting the MPOs trained to help them, help Brittany, address some of these troubled apartment complexes.
Well, I would submit to you that the location around Berry and Stall Cup
Yes, ma'am.
requires just as much attention as Las Vegas Trail does. And with one Brittany, what would be ideal for you in terms of staffing?
Well, ideal would be to have one per division. One for every patrol division. That way they could be the coordinator with all the MPOs, and they could create a list of the actual apartment complexes. Because what Brittany does now is she has a list of these apartment complexes and all the people that have gone through the training, and she has the MPOs spot check, do some of those inspections that we do to make sure they're still in compliance with, the regulations and the classes that they went through.
I'll just tell you this, Chief, and I know I'm going to get some calls. I look at the NPO position as a cushy type position, and that's the way it's been historically. Do you see NPOs willing to get in here and do this work that's taken place in Las Vegas Trail and that's needed in Deep Stop 6? Because I don't see a lot of help coming toward that part of town.
I will say with the proper leadership, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So we've trained all of the MPOs in February to help with the program. So during phase one, it's their responsibility to go out and get their apartment complex registered. So for like East Division, we currently have 46 apartments in the program, some in your area that are currently going through the phases. So it's really just the MPOs getting out there, and they seem, because this program is to help them in the long run, right? So they seem willing to go out there and get everyone signed up. We just have to make sure they show up. So
Well, I have a great NPO, just so you know, but the bad people come out at night.
That is true.
And so, that coordination is very, very important. I yield.
Hey, Brittany, so we have some problem properties on Meadowbrook and Lancaster as well. But do you also promote the National Night Out event to these apartment complexes? That could be also dual serving as a safety social each year. Because the safety social is just once in the program, right? So they only have to do it once?
Yes, so last year we actually had a safety social that was held on National Night Out. But we're trying to hit everyone, right? And so it's hard to make sure they had an MPO or crime prevention specialist because it's such a huge night. So we do talk about National Night Out in the 8-hour training. The crime prevention specialist will talk about it in the safety social, but I think it doesn't work as well on National Night Out.
Yep. Thanks, Brittany. Thanks for all the work you've been doing over in Las Vegas Trail. And I hear Mayor Pro Tem, and I think I can read your mind a little bit. We've got to multiply these services across the city because there's more of you that are needed, and I don't want to lose you, but there's more of you that are needed across the city. Answer this question for me. First of all, I want to make a comment on the 6 months. There's a lot of turnover with these apartment managers, especially if it's a bad apartment. So they may never actually go through the training, and really this is about helping them help the residents there know what's in the. So I think we should take a look at that. The other side is if they don't do it, what are the real repercussions, and are there any if they don't really go through the training?
So according to the city ordinance, it's a $2,000 fine per day per occurrence. So if they don't go through the training, then they could be fined. Code compliance does a good job of telling them about the program and getting them registered when they're applying for their certificate of occupancy or registration. So they also push the program.
Great, that's good to know. So thank you again for what you're doing here, and I think we have to keep on it. I think we're seeing some real strides. You saw some examples in here. I know you and I have talked about some specific anecdotal information too that's happened in the area, but it's again all about just keeping our residents safe. And so if the apartment managers and the leadership of the apartments are making sure that they're following these, then I think it trickles down for sure. Thanks.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next informal report is an overview of property maintenance, responsibilities, and resources for owners of vacant property. And we have a team which includes Assistant Chief Aldridge, Shannon Elder, and Cody Wittenberg, and Melinda Ramos.
Yes, I have a few questions on this one, if we could.
Who wants to take the lead? There we go.
Awesome. Okay. Well, so I asked for this one just because the sheer fact that we're getting sick and tired of these absentee commercial property owners just letting their property go. You can get a hold of them if you want to lease it, but you can't get a hold of them if you want them to fix it. So I'm all for our city doing whatever it takes to put teeth behind our ordinances through like heavy fines as much as we legally can. So one of my questions on the IR is, it just says when property owners are non-responsive, then the city can pursue a 10-day nuisance abatement. But what are we considering non-responsive? Like 24 hours, 48 hours, 2 weeks, 3 weeks?
So when we give notice, we usually give 10 days in order to comply and 4 days for mail.
10 days and then 4 days, okay. Awesome. And then if, as far as like, let's say it's like a landscaping issue and we have one that's absolutely out of control, if they still don't abate it, is it the city, is it just we don't have enough contractors to perform that work and they're backed up, or?
So when you say landscaping, are you talking about high grass?
Yeah,
Because we
not
have
just
an
like-
ordinance on high grass, but we do not have an ordinance necessarily on the landscaping, on maintaining your landscaping.
Grass is definitely part of it, for
Yes.
sure. But then the rest of it, I mean, all of it's just,
So we have an ordinance on high grass. It has to
Okay.
be 12 inches. Once it is 12 inches, we have to notify the property owner once per 12-month period. And then if they fail to comply, it goes over to our mowing contractor, who then will mow it, and we will lien the cost to the property. If it is vacant property, it will go into an automatic mowing cycle and get sent to the mowing contractor every 28 days.
okay, every 28 days, okay. I saw that contract on Bonfire. I could see there's a shortage of contractors, so good to know. Okay, and then my last question was just regarding the signage. On the back page, it says, police are going to continue to work with TPW and place signage at problem locations. I did take the full report from my Fort Worth Report app. Reports for the last year identified the top 10 locations in my specific district. And because there's no HOA or NA around those areas that would be willing to bear the cost of those signs, our office, the district office, is actually looking at procuring those signs. We got the estimates from TPW. I thought it was expensive, so I designed them myself with feedback from residents. We're trying to find, more cost-effective options for those. But is this saying that this can be a cost that's, taken on by TPW, or?
Oh, TPW will not take on the cost.
Okay.
So the money has to come somewhere if we get the signs made and if they're put up. So whether it's, through the police department, TPW, I mean, there has to be a cost associated with it, or even
Right.
the owner, so.
Okay, got it. Yeah, like I said, we're gonna buy those signs ourselves from our office funds, and then in a year, see if it actually made any effect.
Sure.
And of course, we've talked about doing more massive citywide campaign to educate the citizens who are if they would quit giving, then we wouldn't be in this
Absolutely.
position. So
100%.
also created a sign for high drug use areas, but I don't know how well that's gonna go over with legal, but I look forward to running that by you guys to see how that works. I'm all about stirring the pot, so that's all I got. Thanks.
All right, the next informal report is on semi-truck and trailer parking in neighborhoods. And Shannon Elder and Assistant Chief Aldridge are available. Any questions?
Councilmember Martinez.
Okay, I requested this informal report, and just looking at the numbers, you know, we have a lot of cases each year, but very few citations. Is it that these individuals are being warned and then they move, but there's these individuals that are repeat offenders, so each time they come back, like the next week, they have another warning? Okay,
So they get warned once, and then if they're a repeat offender, we issue citations.
Okay, just, you know, just 22 to 24 was 633 cases, and 22 to 24, only 43 citations. Just, I mean, I know that there are, you know, this is happening throughout the city, but it's happening a lot in District 11. Is it just enforcement that we're having an issue with, or why is there such a difference in cases and citations?
So the numbers are specific to private property, and so we are seeing compliance on private property.
Okay, so, but I'm talking about on residential, so that is still considered private property if it's on just a neighborhood street?
So if it's a neighborhood street, it's the police department. And so what we usually do is we go out, we give warnings, try and get them to move their vehicle. Most of the times they do comply. They don't want to have to pay the citations. So anything that's basically in the yards, deal with code compliance, anything that's kind of in the streets, that's us.
Okay, so these are numbers from code compliance, then the citations, okay. Can we get numbers from PD?
Sure.
Okay.
Quick question, this is for you, Chief. When it comes to semi-trucks, large commercial vehicles that do park on residential streets, when I've called it in before in the past, you know, every so often a dispatcher might ask, well, how long have they been parked there? Okay, how much does that factor into a decision whether or not to dispatch someone? I mean, you know, sometimes I don't know how long they've been parked there.
So a lot of it has to do with, is that a no truck parking area? What are the restrictions on the roadway? In residential areas, oversized vehicles cannot be there. And it really just depends on where the location is. The length of time for us really does not matter. But, you know, it's a low priority call, as you know. And so the time to get an officer out there might take some time. So, but I don't know why they would ask you that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, our next informal report is on short-term rental registration. Shannon Elder is available if there are any questions. All right, next informal report is an update on door-to-door vendors. And Janie Morales is available along with Assistant Chief Aldridge.
So my first question would be for Chief Aldridge. In the first bullet in the IR says that if we report the violation of the ordinance, police officers will respond. Is this something that we can expand to our civilian response team to respond to?
No.
Okay.
Because we don't want our civilian response unit being an enforcement unit, so we don't want them writing citations.
Okay.
So, I mean, we want them to be, you know, as safe as possible out there because they don't have the tools or the skills to deal with somebody that might get irate.
Okay, that makes sense. And then I think that's the only PD question that I had. Thank you, though. Why are we doing a biannual instead of an annual registration proposal in this?
Actually, the registration is good for 6 months.
Right, so is there any reason why we couldn't do an annual registration? I mean, I think if we're gonna charge them, it looks like, what is it, $150 to register? Is that? Yeah, I think it should last for a whole year. I mean, if we're gonna pay if we're gonna go through that process and make them pay, we don't wanna be a hindrance to any, you know, businesses, but we also wanna make sure we're keeping folks safe.
Is it because their background check? Go ahead, I'll let you answer the question.
Yeah, no, that's a good.
So I think that may be a factor. We can do a little bit more research on that one to find out if the background check is good for an extended period a period of longer than
Okay.
6 months.
If it is for a year, you don't have to bring it back. If the background check, if we determine that, a year is an adequate period, I'd like to see it a yearly or an annual registration. And then is there anything in the ordinance that would exempt things like our Girl Scouts selling cookies or Boy Scouts selling popcorn, like those types of civic events, or civic type engagements, because I want my cookies.
In the current ordinance, that is not considered a door-to-door, so there is not anything that addresses that at this point.
Okay. When we update the ordinance, can we add some explicit language in there so people know that those are not?
That civic organizations
Yes.
are not?
Yes. And then in relation to the background checks, what have we had any discussion about what in those background checks would disqualify someone from receiving that certificate?
Yes. So in the interest of public purpose and public safety, events like, or violations like violent crimes or thefts are what we would be looking at adding to the ordinance.
Okay. Would any fraud charges as well be part of that?
At this point, we hadn't really researched fraud, but I would think if that fraud led to theft, it might be considered part of it.
Okay. And then is there a time limit on that? So say if it was 20 years ago versus 5 years ago, is it just any of those?
As we move through the ordinance, we will engage legal to determine what a time period should look like.
Okay, perfect. Last thing is, thank you so much for putting this together. I know my residents are going to be much happier knowing that that there is an ordinance that people have to be registered. We'll be able to easily identify them at the door. So if they are in violation, I think it makes it also easier for PD to respond because they can call and say they didn't have the appropriate identification. And so they know to respond to that call quicker than just, I think they shouldn't be here. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, and thank you for your time. And also, again, as mentioned in the IR, for last year's National Night Out, we had created the stickers, the no solicitation stickers, and we happened to bring a few with us. So what we can do is pass them out and leave them also on the table in the back if you would like to take some to your constituents or back to your offices. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our next informal report are on options to recycle or donate items from Old City Hall, and Marilyn Marvin and Cody Wittenberg are available if there are any questions. Yes. All right. Okay.
Cody, whoever's coming up.
Cody's got it.
Hello, Cody. Aside from items that might have some usable value, right? Maybe, you can resell them too. Old furniture. I had also asked about, what about those other things such as metals, right? Maybe you have an item that is no longer usable, right? You really can't sell it, but then you have the recycle value to it. I mean, how good are we in that regard? In terms of, making the transition over from Old City Hall to New City Hall and all the items in between?
Absolutely. So we do have vendors available for metal recycling. And so absolutely, if any department has any need to move a piece of metal, rather than going to the landfill, we will try to divert all of that waste away from our landfills. And so certainly reach out to our environmental services, and we can work to get that scheduled with the vendor and hopefully even make a return on that metal recycling.
Okay, exactly what I need to know. Thank you.
All right, our next informal report is on the process to receive proposals for the development and operations of a renewable natural gas facility at the landfill. Cody is available if there are any questions. All right. Cody, stay close by. Next one is the Trinity River Water Wheel Initiative update. Cody's available if there are any questions.
I'd like just an update on where we are, how we got there, and then what our plan is moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were able to release a second request for proposals for the water wheel project. And it's always disappointing whenever proposals come back and they exceed our available budget. So in order to move the project forward, we're currently working with Streams and Valleys and with the Tarrant Regional Water District to evaluate options to continue to fundraise to see if we're able to secure that. Another benefit component here is we did go back to our vendors, and they've secured the price for the water wheel and the price for the construction through the end of August at this time, and are open to continuing conversations if we need to. But we're excited to continue the conversation and see if we're able to move the project forward.
All right, next informal report.
Wait, David, I had a quick
Oh, sorry.
question, a couple comments, actually. Sorry, Cody. And I realize that you aren't asking for more additional funds at this time, or you're just continuing to fundraise, but is August, I mean, do you have a hard deadline when we're not going to do more fundraising? Or, I mean, can you walk through a timeline of fundraising that you're working through with Streams and Valleys and the other organizations or partnerships you're trying to cultivate to get this funded?
Absolutely. So I think at this point, we want to focus on three key aspects of the water wheel for starters. So one, of course, is the obvious benefit of cleaning up the river and taking that surface floatables or those litter that are floating off the surface. But we also see this as an opportunity to present an icon of our commitment as a city to keep a clean and attractive city, and then also to really invest in that environmental education and promote those concepts of a clean and safe city to future generations at this location along the trail system. So we're gonna be looking at different opportunities with educational partnerships and others to see if there's any opportunities that we can seize for fundraising. In terms of a long-term strategy, we hope to come back this fall with some clear understanding of what we've been able to achieve over the summertime, and hopefully give you a more clear direction on what that looks like.
All right, the next informal report is on a proposed council-initiated zoning change for 4812 Parker Henderson Road in the Echo Heights neighborhood. And LaShondra Stringfellow is available if there are any questions. We good? I'm just looking. All right, we're good. And then the final informal report is on the proliferation of certain uses and applicable zoning regulations. And DJ Harrell and LaShondra Stringfellow and Melinda Ramos are available if there are any questions.
I do have some questions and comments on this one. What you waiting on, DJ? Okay. Thank you for putting this together. I certainly appreciate it. What I appreciate the most is that you have given us options on this IR so that we don't have to come back for a full presentation. We can just kind of pull through it here, so thank you for doing that. On the liquor and package stores, you gave us two options. Can we do both of those options, both the limit the use to more intensive commercial industrial districts and add a distance requirement to other? So we could do both on those? Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And then for our payday lending, I'm in favor of the option that you presented, which was amending the zoning ordinance to add credit access businesses as a defined use and limit the zoning districts that they're allowed. I'd also like them, if we can, have a distance between those as well to make sure that we don't have those popping up. And then with our smoke shops, I think we didn't have, okay, so I didn't understand this option, so I don't have an opinion on it yet. So can you kind of, I didn't understand what removing the threshold did or didn't do to this particular one.
So right now, in order to be considered a retail smoke shop, 90% of your products sold have to be related to tobacco use. Okay. So that is a very high threshold in order to be considered a retail smoke shop. In comparison to some other cities, Dallas had that same kind of threshold, but some other major cities did not have that threshold. So it was the sale of tobacco products. So I think that offers a little bit more ability to make a determination that a shop is a retail smoke shop, and then put any additional regulations. Right now, there's a distance requirements to hospitals, universities, and such. So it doesn't, I'm not necessarily suggesting to take it to 0, but we may want to consider lowering it from the 90 to another percentage. And we can work on some research as to maybe what that should be by visiting some of our current retail smoke shops and seeing really what's their percentage that they're selling in their stores.
Okay. And you said Dallas doesn't, what did Dallas put their limit as?
I believe Dallas is at 90%.
Okay.
Which I think when we were initially doing our smoking ordinance in 2017, we probably reviewed their ordinance and some other major cities' ordinances and probably took that information in.
Okay, I will tell you, my vape-loving Gen Z staff isn't going to like this, but I would like us to explore the reducing that 90% and looking at the a distance between each shop as well, because they do seem to be popping up at an alarming rate.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, and I can't remember if you and I talked about this, Elizabeth, but I've talked to a few colleagues in Oklahoma. And when the state of Oklahoma decided to legalize marijuana, this type of ordinance was a problem for them. And it was overnight that they had smoke shops across their cities, and the ordinance wasn't prepared. So it's an interesting threshold. I'm not saying that we may be a really long way off from that, but I think that this also has happened in lots of neighborhoods unexpectedly.
Well, in this IR, they specifically talk about the hemp and medical marijuana, because that was my concern as well, that if the ledge should at any point decide
step
to,
forward,
then we would be behind the ball in getting to decide where we want them and what they look like. And my guess is that as well, that those smoke shops kind of turn into those as well. So if we could get out in front, I would appreciate that.
Thanks, Wanda.
Mayor, that concludes my report.
Look at that, y'all. Any questions on boards, commissions, zoning cases, M&C log before we roll into presentations? Okay. First up is Chief Noakes with a presentation on fireworks safety, and he's also going to be joined by Chief Jim Davis. Look at all these quitters leaving the meeting.
Sorry, you get me.
They're all leaving. I'm calling you out. You're running away. And Charlie, you can't leave.
All right, you get me today. Sorry about that. So 4th of July, for most people, it's a really fun time. For your mailboxes on July 5th, not so much. You guys get a lot of complaints. You get a lot of concerns from your constituents, and rightfully so. So kind of go over our little preparedness for this year, what we're doing a little bit differently, and some of the things that we've changed that you probably haven't even noticed. So what is the law? Fireworks are illegal, plain and simple. Unless it's a permitted show by the city of Fort Worth, you cannot possess, hold, manufacture, deliver, sell fireworks in and of themselves. If you do, it's a $2,000 fine. So again, fireworks are illegal. I don't think I can say that enough. So our enforcement strategies, you know, they're dependent on a lot of different things that happen, a lot of different factors. So it's the number of calls we receive through the 911 system, number of available officers. We use surveillance cameras a lot that are in the areas that maybe we have these problem locations that we can actually look at it before we send an officer there to determine if there's an issue or not. That helps us out tremendously, gives us a situational awareness of that ongoing event. We use intelligence monitoring with social media because believe it or not, people put on social media everything they're doing and a lot of pictures and videos of what's occurring at the time. You'd be surprised, probably not surprised, in the past, we have surveillance video of U-Haul trucks being pulled up with loads of fireworks being unloaded. That does happen quite frequently, believe it or not. So, you know, all of our calls are prioritized through our communications center. You know, of course, preservation of life is number one for us, and making sure people are safe. So sometimes the fireworks calls are just a little bit lower on that priority list and take a little bit of time to get there. So reporting illegal fireworks. You know, we want you to utilize the hotline, the fireworks hotline. That's very, very, very important. The 4th of July is a very resource-intensive event for us because of all the special events that are going on around town and because of all the officers that are working during the 4th of July holiday. I do want to note that you can text the 911 for emergency situations. However, please do not text the 911 to report fireworks because the emergency situations will override the fireworks all day long. And I don't want to tie up a call taker on a texting thread because of a fireworks call. I will encourage people to use my Fort Worth app that does have a fireworks call annotated on it. Use the 392-4444 number, please, please, please. Those are the calls that we kind of sift through and we get out to the field. So fire department, historically, and Chief Davis and his team has been phenomenal. We sat down, it was for New Year's, and we kind of reevaluated what was fire department's role in fireworks. We know every once in a while, the arson investigators would go out on 4th of July and New Year's Eve, and they would do some enforcement activities for fireworks, and we didn't understand why that ever occurred. It puts them in a very precarious situation because it's not something they do on a very regular basis. And so we made the decision to say, no, police will do the enforcement for the fireworks. However, the fire department still is an instrumental partner for us because they're the ones that are going to be standing up the JEOC. They help us with the hotline. They're going to be, whenever we confiscate the fireworks, we're going to deliver them to the fire department so they can be disposed of properly. For me, it's, they help with the social media messaging, and I believe a lot of the members of council around the table have delivered a message that we're going to be able to use on the social media platforms. And so, just because fire is not part of the enforcement effort doesn't mean that they're not a crucial piece to this. So lastly, community engagement and outreach. We do a lot of social media posts, a lot of flyers, a lot of communication. I see in the audience, we got Cindy Boland, Torchy White. They're great advocates for us on the east side and have worked with us really closely with some of the issues that are going on the east side. Another community that we've worked with pretty extensively over the past year has been Como. We've been working with their neighborhood association committee and the legacy gentleman to help have a very successful program this year. But it's not just those two communities. We reach out to all the communities. Our MPOs have a pretty good pulse on where the problem areas are in the city. And so with that, our MPOs are going to be out working. We're going to have officers available in every division working in an overtime capacity to help address the fireworks calls. So, and last, we're going to be communicating all of our messaging through social media, the news channels, any kind of outlet that we can to get the message out to everybody that we're going to be out and that fireworks are dangerous. So with that, unless Chief Davis has something to add, I will take any questions.
Thank you, Chief. And I know this is really focused on illegal fireworks, but I know we have several permitted fireworks shows that'll be going on across the city.
That
Is
is
there
correct.
anything we can do to get the word out that those are permitted, they're gonna happen? Do we have a schedule of any of those that the city can put out? Is that, or since they're public shows, we can't do that?
I would have to defer to Renee and his group because I think they would probably have a list of those permitted shows.
Okay.
But yes, I have no problem sharing what the permitted shows are. We could definitely share that on social media.
Okay, I think that would be helpful.
Fire has a
We
list?
do.
Okay,
Okay. I do think that would be helpful for those of us that get those calls regularly.
yes.
Any other questions, council? Thank you, gentlemen. Our next presentation is a briefing on police technology, also with Chief Aldridge.
Not really, just a little one. Okay, so this is going to be kind of a very brief overview of our police technology. It's kind of like a 100,000-foot view. It's not going to get down into the weeds too much, but I just kind of want to highlight some of the things that we do through our department. Fort Worth Safe Initiative. You guys have heard this probably over the last several years. This actually was created back in 2021, May of 2021. We started looking at a different way of addressing violent crime in our city and addressing crime in our city. Prior to that, if you guys remember, the way that we used to address violent crime was saturation details. We used to put a large number of officers in these communities and pretty much stop almost anything that moved, wrote tickets, and there were some innocent citizens that were getting kind of hemmed up on some very minor violations, and it was impacting the community police relations. And we looked internally and said, hey, there's something we can do better. And so we want to focus on the most violent offenders. That's really kind of our biggest goal in this. It's a laser-focused approach that we can actually go after these offenders, follow them, and arrest them. We want to pair with the community outreach. We have our MPOs. Like if we serve a search warrant in a certain neighborhood, we want our MPOs to go out there after the fact, talk with the community members and advise them kind of what's going on while we're out there and see if there's any other programs that we can help with them to try and solve some of these issues that are going on. Because not every issue in these troubled areas have to do with police. They may deal with code compliance. They may deal with another city department that we would like to make those connections to. And our whole goal in this is that we're not dealing this secretly. This is public. We want people to know that this is our initiative. This is what we're doing to try and keep Fort Worth safe. So prior to 2021, a lot of the teams kind of operated independently whenever they were addressing violent crime. Now, they talk to one another, but with this new program, we kind of marry teams together. Like narcotics and our DRU teams, they go out together, they're partnered together, and they address the problems together. Each week, we have a crime meeting, so all these units can kind of get into the same room. They can get a game plan going for the next week, and they can look back and see what successes they've had over the previous week. And so this is a constant evolution as we go. Whenever we started the crime initiative, basically in May of 21, it has morphed and gotten so much better since even just this year. And so every year we try and make improvements to make it better. We like to leverage technology. The cameras are kind of a game changer for us in a bit because it allows us to see areas and not have police officers in those areas all the time. And so for us, we like using those. We like using the license plate readers and, of course, our ballistics, the NIBIN test results. Education and drugs, that's really a big deal for us, is that we want to make sure that our young people are aware of what's going on. We've done around 250 school presentations and about 21 staff presentations, and our narcotics units have been in the schools talking about the dangers of fentanyl, which we know that is extremely a grave concern right now with our young population. And so we're trying to get the school resource officers spun up so they can give some of those classes and not have to depend on just the narcotics unit to do it. So let's dig into kind of our technology piece, the Fusion Center. The Fusion Center itself was established in August of 2019. It's made up of 3 separate units: Homeland Security, our Intel Exchange, and the Real-Time Crime Center kind of encompass what our Fusion Center is. If you look at this map, you can see that you have North Texas Fusion Center, which is in Collin County. You have the Dallas Fusion Center, which is in Dallas. Prior to our Fusion Center coming online, there really wasn't anything from Tarrant County to the west. And so we relied on a lot of the information from either the North Texas Fusion Center or the Dallas Fusion Center, and we saw that there was a big gap. And so we felt it was very important for us to stand up a Fusion Center so we can have that information sharing process for some of our western and southwestern counties. So in Intex, the Intelligence Exchange, there's 4 full-time analysts. Their whole job is to do risk assessments and, for our 84 annual events. And as you guys know, most of our annual events are huge. They're not small things that happen. The stock show is one of our biggest ones that has over 1 million visitors that come to that. So they are the lead on sharing information for all of our partners, not only within our Fusion Center area, which is the 10 western counties, but also with the North Texas Fusion Center and also the Dallas Fusion Center. Their top priorities, of course, is that information sharing. They also do a lot of risk assessments for the protests that go along, not only in our area, but around the region in case it does come to our area, so we can anticipate some of the issues that might come up. So one of their biggest things that they're prepping for right now, FIFA 2026. It's 9 Super Bowls in 40 days, and there are a lot of things that can happen within that time frame, and we're going to be impacted, quite a bit with the influx of people that are going to be here. So they are working on coordinating with the other Fusion Centers that are hosting the same type of games so they can get a situational awareness of what's going on in those areas as well and see if they are the same that we're seeing in here locally. Homeland Security. If you can envision Homeland Security, our Homeland Security unit is like boots on the ground. So they can do some intel analysis behind the computer, but those are the guys that basically do our dignitary protection. They're the undercover guys that will go out there whenever we have an actual real threat. They will go interview people, arrest people, but those are the ones that we want them to be out there kind of in the shadows for some of these dangerous things that are going on. Real-Time Crime Center. Most of you guys know what the Real-Time Crime Center is. It's 18 sworn position, 1 professional staff, 24/7 operations. They basically monitor the flock surveillance cameras. Their primary role is to help patrol. Give a situational awareness picture of what's going on in the streets all the time. So every once in a while, calls will come in all the time, and they are able to kind of cherry pick those calls if it sounds very important, and they can do some data mining on those calls before officers get there. And so there are times that they know information about some of the actors that are involved before the officers get on scene, and that information can be relayed to them. They are really, really good at what they do, and they can search these databases quicker than I can even think. So They do a phenomenal job, and they really do help our officers in the field. So they deal with Motorola Command Aware. That's a software program. It helps the officer, it helps them see where the calls for service are, where the patrol vehicles are, and where our cameras are, all in one kind of platform. So they don't have to click on multiple different platforms to see everything that's going on. They also have Flock OS, which again is a situational platform. And it's where all the LPR cameras are, the gunshot detection systems, and if we have any launched drones out there, it kind of maps them on a map as well. And so those two platforms in and of itself kind of incorporate a lot of different of the technologies into one place. So surveillance cameras, you guys have heard a lot about surveillance cameras over the years. And in fact, our surveillance camera program really got off the ground whenever we did the Stop 6 Neighborhood Improvement Project. That's whenever we were really getting into the cameras. We were trying to understand, what is the value of these cameras? And fortunately for us, the community members saw the value as well. And so in each of the neighborhood improvement programs, we've been able to add cameras to that, which has really kind of multiplied our efforts of getting cameras out into our city. Right now, we have about 1,150. They're called, pan, tilt, zoom cameras, which means they're on a pole, but we can move them around. We can look at things. The one good thing about these cameras is that we can build in the LPR technology into these cameras. And so they can be multifaceted cameras. We don't have to have stationary flock cameras just sitting there running plates. We do build these in-house. So the in-house cost is about half of what it would if we bought them, out on the open market. And the retention schedule for these is 5 days because the quantity of video in 5 days, if we haven't seen something on the camera, it overwrites itself and we continually start over. The other cameras you guys have heard about are flock cameras. So flock cameras are basically license plate reader. They take a picture of the plate and they run the plate through our system and you get hits. And those hits are relayed to the patrol officers, and so patrol officers are able to respond. A lot of the hits that we have right now, the majority of the hits are for violent crimes. That's it. That's what we want to use these cameras for, is to get violent criminals off the streets. We don't use these for traffic warrants. We don't use these for suspended licenses. We literally use these for felonies and above to get violent predators off the street. So currently we have about 250 flock cameras in the city of Fort Worth. And for the private entities, whether it's a neighborhood association or an apartment complex, we have another 200 cameras that we have access to, that we get the information from. Gunshot detection. For us, this is kind of new. You guys have heard of other companies and other groups that have gunshot detection technology. This is through Flock, and what we're doing is kind of a trial basis with them and trying to see how this is going to work out. There's going to be a 5 square mile area. Each one of these locations basically is 1 square mile, and these cameras have microphones on them, and whenever they hear gunshots or record gunshots, basically that's going to send an alert to the real-time crime center, and we can get officers kind of rolling that way. Those incidents are retained for 200 incidents unless there's something of evidentiary value, and then we put them in evidence.com. You may wonder, how were these locations picked? Why did we just randomly pick them? No, we looked at a heat map across the city for all shootings and shots fired calls that have occurred. And so, as you can see, these hotspot maps correlate with those locations of where we're going to put these gunshot detection. So a little bit of a transition from technology, but one thing I wanted to address, because Councilman Flores asked this previously, was collision avoidance technology. Our current vehicles, we have front collision avoidance warnings, we have side lane indicators, we have backup camera warnings. Only on the higher end vehicles do you see the automatic emergency braking and certain other technologies. With that request, we were asked to look at Mobileye 8 Connect. We did look at them, and really the technologies we have in our cars right now are what they offer. So there's nothing more that they could offer that we don't already have, but that doesn't mean we're not open to looking at other technologies down the line to see if we can make it safer for our patrol officers driving down the street. So with that, we're always going to look for technology to help us out. That's our goal. And we want to make sure that it fits within our mission and that we use that technology within federal and state laws. We want to make sure it's safe for our officers out on the street, and we want to be able to pass this information instantaneously to the officers, so they can have a situational awareness. Whenever they show up on scene, they have a better picture of what is going on. I know that's a lot of information, and that's only a tip of the iceberg, but I'll open it up to questions if you have any.
Council questions for Chief Aldridge? Yes, Councilor Martinez.
Chief, are the gunshot detection equipment going to be able to differentiate between gunshots and fireworks?
So that, from what we were told, yes, they are. But until we get them out there and we actually start testing them, we're not going to know.
Okay, so they'll be up for 4th of July and we can...
We're in the process of putting them up now. I don't know what the time frame is to get them all put up, but I know that we are in the process of getting them installed.
How sensitive are those detectors, the gunshot detectors? Like, are they only programmed to hear loud noises, or would they pick up a conversation as someone walked across the street?
So from my understanding, they're only programmed to pick up gunshots.
Okay, so we can't say like, hey, detector, and it hears us. I'm being funny, but
Yeah,
I mean,
no.
it's not that
It wouldn't be that sensitive. No, it's not to eavesdrop on the population walking by.
Great.
Thank you, Chief.
All right, thank you.
Council, our next presentation is take-home vehicle policy update. I think Marilyn Marvin is going to kick things off, or is it, nope, Jess, go ahead.
Oh, goodness. All right, perfect. Thank you. Jessica McCachran, Assistant City Manager. I'm going to present on this, and then if you have any specific questions, we've also got our both police chief and fire chief available to answer any questions about their specific policy. I should be able to answer any specific questions about our general policy. If I need to call up reinforcement, I can do that. So to give you a reminder of where we started, last year we were asked a question about our take-home vehicles. And so that launched about a 6-month project to look into both what is our policy, are we in compliance with our policy, what vehicles are being taken home, and where are they going right now. And as you will recall, we came back to you and presented the findings in December. Unfortunately, it was not good news, and I'll just give you a reminder in just a second of that as we go into that. But the good news is we are here today to tell you that we have a lot of policy updates that we're making, and we've made some really good progress on that, and then we'll review our next steps with you as well. So this was the kind of wrap-up slide that was in our presentation to you in December, just showing you that we found we had a lot of issues both with the form that we were using to have employees report what vehicles were being taken home for off-site parking. We had reporting requirements that we found we were not doing, both internal quarterly reporting requirements, also annual reporting requirements as part of the budget process. We found that we just really didn't have a lot of processes set up to achieve what was in the policy. And so we had a lot of work to do. I will tell you that as we started reviewing our policy, we also compared to a lot of our benchmark cities to see what was in their policies. Unfortunately, we found that there's really no standard when it comes to what cities allow vehicles to go home, what is the range that they allow to go, off-site parking, that kind of thing. But we have come up with what we think is a good recommendation to you, and we've worked with all of our internal departments so that they have provided feedback along the way on what we are bringing forward to you today. This was the initial map that we showed you back in December. What we found, unfortunately, is about 58% of our vehicles that are going to off-site parking locations were going outside of the city limits. And we agree that really wasn't probably the right intent of the policy when we set it up, so that was a big thing for us to take a look at. At the time that we did our look last year, we had 3 main departments that were still utilizing take-home vehicles. The first was property management, second was police, and third was fire. So taking a look at the administrative regulation E6, which is regarding the use of city vehicles, this is the policy that applies to all general employees, and then it has a reference back to police and fire specific policies that are within theirs governing their vehicle usage as well. We realized first and foremost, we needed to update all 3 policies to make our definitions match. We had a lot of discrepancies between the definitions and the policies, or we just had a lot of things that were not defined initially. So that was one of the first things we did. We also clarified what the driver's license checks are that are required, and that's one of our practices that we're setting up is how do we do those annual driver's license checks? Who's required to do that? What is the process? And how do we ensure that they're checking it each year? We also had a requirement in the policy to take defensive driving every 3 years. But again, we didn't have the process by which we could tell employees, here's how you can go take that defensive driving, here's where you report it back. We didn't have a good process for department directors to check and see, are their employees doing that? So we've made good progress there. We had reporting requirements in the policy. Again, no good practice, so we're proposing some updates to that to really clean up what reporting is required. We're recommending that we go to an annual reporting internally for the departments. Now, they can always go more if they want, but at a minimum, we want departments to be reporting their after-hours usage annually to their department directors. We had a vehicle use form that just had a lot of holes, if you will. So on the vehicle use form, anybody could submit the form. So I could go submit it on behalf of a coworker instead of me submitting it. The address form didn't have a template that would kick it back if you didn't put in a real address. So we had some just things that you couldn't even really tell what was the address where they were going. So our fleet division staff, Eliana Guevara, Brad Hunter, and Marilyn Marvin, they've really worked with IT over this to fix the form, all the deficiencies that we found with the form. And they've set up a lot of checkpoints in the form, if you will, too, to where you cannot submit it if it is not correctly completed and all of the answers are correct, meaning your driver's license, you have a valid driver's license, you've done your defensive driving, you have no accidents or within that time frame kind of a thing. It will kick it back. Also, we did set up, if somebody is a new hire and maybe they're coming from out of state, they've got 90 days to get a Texas driver's license. If they don't get that Texas driver's license within 90 days and update their form, it will then notify back to the department director that we're missing something. And so it's a good reminder for the department director to be able to manage all of theirs. And let me make one note too. The vehicle use form is not just for those city vehicles that are going to offsite parking. This is a form that actually covers many things. It covers any employee that drives a city vehicle in the course of business. So that could be just your day-to-day driving. It covers if an employee takes a vehicle home to their residence for parking, if it's in compliance with the policy. It covers if a vehicle is parking there, if an employee is parking a vehicle off-site, perhaps at a different city facility than their assigned work location. Or it also covers if an employee is driving their personal vehicle for the active business as well. So honestly, a lot of employees within the city of Fort Worth will use this form, which is why it really was so important to make it better. Again, we also identified a process to implement the annual justification that was required to the Fort Worth lab, previously called the budget office. It was written in the policy that you had to do it, but we really didn't have a mechanism or a way to tell you how to do that. And so that's being implemented right now. And then two notable changes to the general employees, again, those that are going to be governed by ARE 6, is that number one, we actually reduced the eligibility criteria for who can take home a vehicle, or I should say park it off-site. Previously, it had about 4 different reasons that you could authorize an employee to take home a vehicle, and they were pretty broad. We've really come back to say only those employees that are actually on call or are required to respond to an emergency situation really need to be taking home a vehicle. And so again, I'll remind you, property management was really the last department amongst general employees that had some take-home vehicles, so it's a minimal impact to the organization. Those employees that are on call, though, on a rotational basis, you will often see their vehicles go home with them. And again, that's because we want them to be able to respond when the call comes in pretty quickly versus going to their assigned work site and then out to wherever the need is. And then last, we are limiting off-site parking vehicles or take-home vehicles for general employees to in city limits only. So back to that map, I think we had about 10 or so general vehicles that were going outside the city limits. Those will come off as well. We will not do those anymore. And then just to remind you, for those employees that maybe live outside of the city limits that will no longer be eligible to take home a vehicle to park at their residence, one alternative to still leaving it at their assigned work location is they can park it at another approved offsite location. We have a lot of employees that will park them at another city facility, perhaps that's closer to the city limit boundary, but on their way home to work. We've seen some that have approval to park them at churches. I've seen schools, county locations, things like that. So that is also an option to an employee where it gets it closer to their residence so they can hop in their vehicle as soon as they get inside the city limits and respond directly to wherever the need is. This is just another look comparing side by side what our current policy had to what our proposed policy. Again, some of these I've already mentioned. One of them that I'll note in there is that definition of a temporary use being defined as up to 2 weeks. That's traditionally where your on-call employees will fall. But another example of where we may intentionally tell people, we want you to take your vehicles home. If we know that we have bad weather coming, say for example, a winter storm coming, we may want a lot of our employees to take home their four-wheel drive vehicles, again, so that when those calls start to come in, they can respond quickly to whatever the need may be. I mentioned this one already, but new employees with an out-of-state driver's license, you've got 90 days now to get your driver's license here in Texas. That was previously undefined, and so we clarified that. And again, through the form, we've set up the actual reminder, so if it's not completed in time, it's not going to fall through the cracks and become one of those that we're just not aware of. The defensive driving that's required every 3 years, our HR department and risk, they've been working on setting up an in-house city-sponsored defensive driving program. They're actually starting the testing of it, I think within the next week or two, and so that will roll out by early fall. So all employees will be able to take this course. They're not having to go somewhere else to go find it. And then another notable change is that all final approvals for anybody with an off-site parking vehicle, especially take-home, the new approval is the department director. So again, all directors will have a knowledge of what vehicles are within their departments that are approved for off-site parking, and they will be required to review this information annually. Again, they'll have to justify it to the Fort Worth lab through the budget process, and then also all employees will have to do the form annually regardless. So previously, once I was hired, I did my form. I never got another notice. So as long as I didn't move or something didn't change, my form just stayed active. And what we found when we reviewed all of our data is you had a lot of forms out there that really no longer had the vehicle, or maybe they moved their assigned work location. So by this annual requirement to redo it every year, we will catch a lot of those things as well. All right, for police, they updated their guiding principles with how they evaluate and look at take-home vehicles that are assigned. First and foremost, it's authorized for sworn personnel based on the nature of their work and any duty obligations in an emergency situation. Their current policy also references high frequency of after-hours vehicle usage, or work usage, I'm sorry. Non-sworn police employees previously fell under their policy, but again, they will fall under the Administrative Regulation E6. So that means non-sworn police employees, again, general employees, they will no longer be able to take-home vehicles outside of the city limits, and they'll only be allowed to have those take-home vehicles if they have the nature of their frequent callbacks or they have an emergency response requirement. This was already in their policy, but again, it's a really important guiding principle, and this is both in police and fire, but vehicles are only to be used in the performance of their official business. They are not to be used to give rides to family members or other things like that. Ultimate approval for take-home vehicles, this is reserved for the chief of police or the executive assistant chief, and it will be reviewed annually, both with the updated form, also their checks that they're doing throughout the year. The policy is also being updated to include mission-critical positions that will be identified by list, by division, and the nature of response, going along with the justification to take home vehicles based on the need to respond to emergency situations. Police and fire are both proposing to allow take-home vehicles to go up to a radius of 20 miles outside of the city limits, and that coincides with about a 30-minute drive response time based on data from the North Texas Central of Governments and the traffic network in the area. And both police and fire in the proposed policies are asking for a waiver process based on need, but that is approved by the city manager. So anything beyond that 20 miles will have to go to Mr. Cook. And then again, each officer that is being called back will be required to document every emergency call out or after-hour weekend community event meetings. We initially talked about setting up a separate reporting portal or maybe form, if you will, that these could be tracked. But what we realized is we can really do this through payroll where they're already reporting their time. So we had a time code through our payroll system for emergency callback pay. What we didn't have is a separate payroll code for those that are coming to a lot of after-hour functions, community functions, perhaps on the weekend. So we'll work with IT to set up a separate payroll code. I think it makes a lot of sense for employees to have one place to report what they're doing, and most people don't forget to report their payroll time, their work time, so they can get paid. So this will allow us the opportunity to pull a report as frequently as we want, again, at a minimum annually, but the chiefs can do that on a monthly basis or however often they want. Side-by-side look at some of the notable changes within the proposed police policy. I've mentioned some of these, but the justification or who gets assigned a vehicle will change from a tiered system to no tiered system, but again, based on position, need for emergency callback, mission critical position, the like. The 20-mile radius limit that I've mentioned there, annual approval required, an auditing function for after-hours usage, again, that's through the payroll system, and then the definitions to match our personnel regulations and our ARE6. For the fire department, updated guiding principles, very similar to what we just covered, so I won't walk through every single one of them. But just as an example of who in the fire department might have a take-home vehicle for emergency response, you could have perhaps the bomb squad, arson people, those with a canine where their vehicle is equipped and they keep their canines at home. Obviously, they need a way to get the canine back and forth. Same thing with the 20-mile radius from the city limits based on an approximate 30-minute response time. And again, all employees do the vehicle use agreement annually as opposed to before. Final look at side-by-side, very similar to what we've already covered for both police as well. All right, taking a look at an updated map now, you'll notice that property management vehicles, which were previously noted in orange, they've been removed from this map. They will not have eligibility to take them outside the city limits, so those are coming off already. Police and fire residing outside that 20-minute buffer and that 20 miles. That 20 miles is shown as this purple boundary on there. So those within that, outside of that 20-mile boundary, they will no longer be eligible for a take-home vehicle. Again, they can park them at one of those alternative locations that I mentioned just a few minutes ago. And then I would mention that the police chiefs are working right now to continue looking over their final list to determine what other positions may currently have a vehicle but won't qualify under the proposed policy and which ones of those need to come off. And so these numbers are still going to be changing over the next probably month or two as they work through that final list. But this is what you saw in December, just updated. What I've removed here is that last line that was beyond the 20-mile boundary. So these are all the remaining. You'll see the total outside the city limits for fire is 5, for police is currently 354. Compared to our total. As for our next steps, we're going to complete our final review and testing of the form update. I really am extremely impressed with all the thought that they put into that form. Again, that was our fleet division, our IT division working together to identify what were all the deficiencies previously that we identified and how do we close those deficiencies so we can't let this fall through the cracks again. We anticipate approving all of these policies with all final edits on September 1st. They'll be effective then, and then by October 1st, we will start rolling out the actual implementation of all of the updates with our employees. We're suggesting a phased-in approach just because that is a lot of employees. Again, it's not just those with take-home vehicles, but nearly the entire organization if you drive a vehicle of any kind. And so we'll have to phase out how many are doing that form, working through the kinks that we have. Hopefully we don't have any as we're in test right now. We'll also provide the training on the reporting requirements. We'll also show the department directors how to pull their own reports so they can track after-hours responses and the usage of those vehicles. And then we will also roll out the defensive driving requirement. As we reported to you in December, we have a lot of employees that were not caught up on defensive driving. So again, this will also be a big push to get everybody through the new system that will be in-house and get that done. Okay. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, or likewise, we've got our chiefs that can come up as well.
Thank you, Jess. Questions from council? Councilman Wallersdorf?
Question, I just want to clarify a couple of the numbers. On slide 11, it says beyond the 20-mile buffer, it says 25 vehicles. But then on the next one, it says within the 20-mile buffer, 25, and outside city limits, 354.
Yeah, so if you add them each one up, so the first or the second line in that table, within 5 miles, the bulk of our vehicles that are going outside the city limits are really within 5 miles of the city limits. So within that 10-mile buffer, which really I should clarify is between 6 and 10 miles, then is going to be 63. Within that 11 to 15 buffer is 25. So if you add all of those outside the city limits up, then that's how you get to that total outside the city limits number at the bottom.
Gotcha, okay.
Yes.
Awesome.
Sorry, thank you, I should have clarified.
You're welcome. I guess my next questions would be for Chief Noakes or
Okay.
Aldridge, whoever's answering those.
Neil Oakes, Chief of Police, Fort Worth PD. Yes, sir.
Thanks, Chief. The reason I want to present these questions to you is because obviously the lion's share is here, police, I think. PMD and fire was thrown in there just to kind of make it look like it wasn't targeting police in this case. I guess my first question is, did you know that the price of milk in Afghanistan is $2.70?
No, sir.
You're probably wondering why I'm asking that, why it matters. I'm asking the same thing about this entire policy, like why we're even talking about it. I feel like we entrust you with our most valuable asset or resource, and that's our residents. I think we can trust that your, the policy that you have is a good one. So has this policy, or has it currently ever affected the budget that you've been approved for every year? Has it ever created an issue?
No, sir, it has not created an issue or caused us to go over budget.
Okay. So have you ever personally felt like the policy was being taken advantage of by any of your officers?
Absolutely not. Any officer who has a take-home vehicle has been approved to take that vehicle home.
Okay. And then as far as, it seems like we always turn around, we say, this council is supportive of our police and it's supportive. However, do you think that this is making it more restrictive? Do you think that's sending the wrong message? I believe it's sending the wrong message to our police officers saying, hey, we trust you and we appreciate what you do, call to service, run to a sound of chaos. But this one small, I don't want to call it benefit, but perk, whatever you want to call it, we're going to go ahead and take that away. I'm not going to ask you that. I'm not going to put you in that spot, but I feel like it's sending the wrong message. Do you think that with the take-home policy as it is, or I guess as it was, do you felt that it helped with retention? Because we all know retention's a huge issue right now, so is recruitment. Do you think that's ever really served as like, hey, it's a nice to have, it's helped with retention at all?
It's definitely possible. As you know, there's a recruiting and retention crisis across the country. We're doing well in Fort Worth compared to other cities. We see a lot of agencies who are finding new and creative ways to either recruit or retain. So I could see how some officers might look at this as a reason to stay with the department because they feel like they're being taken care of.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks. That's all I have for now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from council? Chris?
Jess, if you will come back up. So I think when Councilman talked about the budget, and so I think it may be beneficial. I know Councilwoman Beck has some things. The gas that is put in the take-home vehicles is paid for by the city of Fort Worth.
Correct.
Okay. And so if the change of this policy allowing those vehicles not to go outside of 20 miles will eventually save the city of Fort Worth dollars in gas mileage.
Certainly. I mean, the more your vehicles drive, the more gas you have. The less vehicles you drive, the less gas you pay.
Sure. And if you would go to slide number 4. Okay. This is an outlook. This is the first slide you showed us back in December.
Back in December.
Okay. And this, if you can just kind of explain this map, I think the black you can barely see it, it's actually the city of Fort Worth.
Exactly. So the black and the gray shaded area, that is inside the city of Fort Worth. That's your corporate city limits as it stands today. The green line was to show what that first 5-mile buffer is. This aligns with the table. The next line is your 10-mile buffer, your 15, and then your 20.
Okay, and I think we kind of discussed this the last time, and I think we couldn't really remember, but those dots that's up there, can you give us a estimate of where that is at?
Oh, goodness. I did look last time and I can't remember, but I think, so this one in the top corner, well, no, I was going to say Louisville, so that's not. What's the lake north of that? See, I'm terrible at my geography. Okay, there we go. No, sir, I'll be honest, I really don't remember. I can remember that one.
I think they said Ray Harper or something.
Past Waxahachie. I don't remember where that one, is that Ennis maybe?
Yeah.
I don't.
Alvarado, maybe, something like that. So, in the policy that we're proposing, I think it's gonna be on your last map that you have. Can you pull that one up?
Correct. Right, so looking at what's inside the purple boundary. So
Right.
these are still shown on there, but they would be coming off under this proposed policy.
Okay, I'll yield for a moment.
Again, unless an exception is made by the city manager, they would be coming off.
Sure.
Thank you. Questions from council? Councilmember Beck?
I have some questions. The first thing that I want to address is a question that Councilman Lauersdorf asked, is this has ever impacted your budget? And your response was no, correct?
Well, the response was, if I understood the question correctly, was causing us to go over budget. Obviously, is it a cost on the budget? Yes.
Yeah.
Correct. So you answered that it has not caused you to go over budget.
The take-home policy itself?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay. So, David Cook, was it last budget cycle that we had an adjustment to PD's budget because they were $2 million, approximately $2 million over in fuel? Was that last year or the year before?
I'd have to check. I don't
Okay.
remember.
But it was in the last 2 years, for sure.
2 years. Fernando gave me a 2-year sign.
Yes. So we have been over budget on fuel by $2 million.
Which was attributed to the increase in gas prices.
Right.
rather
And
than
none of that,
vehicles.
so is it your statement that driving to Hillsborough, Waxahachie, almost to Possum Kingdom Lake wouldn't have contributed to that overage in your gas?
Well, obviously, the further someone drives, the more gas they will use.
Correct. Do you know what the average MPG on a Tahoe is?
No, I don't know specifically what it is.
It's 15 miles city and 20 miles highway. So gas, since we know how much milk costs in Afghanistan, gas in the United States costs about $3.50 a gallon. So if we're driving a Tahoe and we're gonna assume that it's getting the best gas mileage possible, if it's 20 miles a gallon, then that means to get us from the city limits to that residence at 20 miles outside of the city limits, it's $3.50. That's $7 a day, that's $1,800 a year just in gas, not to do the job, not to even drive all the way into work, but from the city limits to that officer's home. And $1,800 adds up quite fast. And so I think that it's an incorrect statement to say that this has never caused any budgetary issues. While you might not be able to parse out the percentage of that $2 million that went over, I think that it's fair to say that driving 10 to 15, 20, even multiple hours outside of the city limits is going to cause us to increase the amount of gas that we use. The second question I have, and this is for Jess. So we're getting rid of any, across the city, any department, there won't be, because previously PD had, I think, a monthly reporting requirement, and fire was quarterly, correct?
Now, within their policy, they may still have a different reporting requirement. I can't remember what you proposed if the change. The city's general AR E6 originally had I think it was quarterly reporting requirement. And what we're proposing is to go to an annual. But again, any department head can do it as frequently as they want if they want something more. At a minimum, this is what we're proposing to require.
And so what are PD and fire proposing under this, any policy changes? Are you keeping it at the monthly, or is that changing?
One thing we'd like to do, and I appreciate ACM McCackern bringing up the change to the time code. If we can make this something that's more efficient, something that's easier for people to report, and something we can more readily pull up, then we could do it as frequently as we need to. The policy and the draft that it's in is just that, it's a draft. One of the reasons we're here today is to get input from members of the council, and that's some information I'd like to hear from council, how frequently you'd like to see those reports.
You're asking if we'd like to see the reports?
No,
is
how
that-
frequently do you suggest?
Oh. I mean, I think that you know the operations of your department, and I think what you need to manage it would be appropriate. I mean, if it's a month, if it's a quarter, I think annually, quite frankly, for city employees, now granted, we're doing things very differently with city employees now, so they might not be driving as often.
And that was kind of where we were going with it, is we don't have near as much to track, so it didn't make sense to have it as frequently of a reporting
I
requirement.
mean, I think that would be a great question for for our Fort Worth lab to answer, because for me, quarterly seems, right? The gut response to me is quarterly seems like a good interval, because if someone's not doing it, right, that gives you the red flag to know, hey, you don't have a year's worth of stuff you have to go back and fix. You've got maybe a couple of months worth of things you have to go back and fix. And I'm sure it would help audit and anyone else that's looking to dig in. Okay, and so then my next question is, what are mission critical positions? So you haven't brought a definition to us today, so tell me what that means.
Do you want it?
I'm sorry?
I have your list printed. Do you want it?
Well, no, that's fine. So mission critical positions, those are the things, as Jessica explained earlier, ACM McCackern, that we're going through to determine exactly are mission critical. So basically what we're talking about with mission critical positions, we have those positions where we need an immediate response. We want to make sure officers can respond as efficiently as possible to emergency calls. I'll tell you another category that we want to look at as well. Something that also is critical to our mission is our community-facing components. And I think everyone around the table here has worked extensively with NPOs. Now, many of them are part of our mobile field force team, which is the team we need to respond quickly, which will make them fall into critical mission anyway. But the number of hours they spend after hours at meetings, at forums, at different events, and on weekends, I believe they fall into a mission critical area as well.
Okay, and so I guess in the previous policy, you had the 3 buckets, and it was the emergency
Tiers.
response, highly visible, or after hours, and then increasing safety within the city, or visibility within the safety. So are those 3 buckets gonna go away and be replaced by the mission critical umbrella?
Yes, we're looking into more of the mission critical rather than having the tiers that we had before.
But
I understand your question.
Let me back up. So in the policy as y'all have it now, the qualifiers to receive a take-home vehicle were one of those 3 things. And so my question is, instead of having those 3 separate definitions where if you're looking at a position and you go, is it A, B, or C, now it'll just be whether or not it falls under that mission critical definition.
Thank you for that clarification. I thought you meant the different tiers that we had before, but you're talking about something else. Those 3 things are what we're using to determine what's going to be mission critical. So actually they were working together to determine that list. And the list is not complete now, but we'll be able to bring a complete list to you when we finalize the policy.
Okay. A couple areas of heartburn that I've got here that I want to discuss. When we initially saw this map 6 months ago in December, those dots caused a lot of pearl clutching. They caused pearl clutching amongst ACMs, amongst council members, and amongst the community. I can tell you I had numerous people reach out to me and specific to that, to what we saw, and thanked me for asking that question, because when you look at this map, there are some pretty egregious dots up here. And what it seems like to me is, instead of coming with a solution that reduces those number of dots or makes it more reasonable for the residents, we're proposing something that just codifies where we should be doing better. And so 20 miles to me seems pretty far. 20 miles is on the other side of Weatherford, it's on the other side of Denton, It's on the other side of Cleburne. And if I'm thinking about if I can get there fast, right, because you said immediate response to calls, I, as a resident, have concerns about the operational ability for folks to get there quickly. So can you address how folks living that far out, and I'm not trying to tell officers to move, but how does this not impact operationally, how expeditiously you're able to answer some specific calls?
Well, obviously, the further someone lives out, the longer it would take to respond. That's true. What we tried to look at is, basically, we're trying to balance the need for us to provide efficient, professional police service with our requirement to be good stewards of the tax funds that our residents entrust us with.
Sure. Do you think the 20 miles is a good steward?
Absolutely. Within a 20-mile buffer, you're talking about a 30-minute commute. I could have someone that lived in South Fort Worth that could make it to North Fort Worth if they needed to in 30 minutes, possibly because the city has grown so much. So yes, I do believe the 20-mile buffer is us being good stewards.
Do you know how long it takes to get from Granbury to Bob Olin?
I haven't timed that.
It's 45 minutes. And Lake Granbury's within that 20-mile buffer.
I may just add here, I think we go around the table, I think 20 miles is very reasonable. I don't know how the council feels around the table. I fully respect Councilmember Beck's position. At the end of the day, this is a city management policy. We won't vote on this. So I think what they really need is feedback. Councilmember Beck has provided her feedback very clearly, and she's done a lot of research on that. But I think at the end of the day, if someone lives within the 20-mile buffer and they're a homicide detective and they're off duty, they get called in and they can get there in 30 minutes, it's reasonable. They should be able to take them the vehicle. You and I may disagree on that, but I think this body can provide that feedback and we can move on.
Sure. I've got some more feedback to provide.
I'm sure you do.
All right. So we're all on the 20 miles. I've made it very clear that I think that is not a good steward of.
But what
our
would you
tax dollars.
propose, Councilmember Beck?
10 miles.
For what reason?
I think 10 miles, one, if you go back to the map, can you do the rings?
But that's without any knowledge about who the vehicles belong to, what roles they play, their criticality of the position. It's just 10 miles.
If their position is so critical that we should evaluate it on this map as to where they live inside 10 miles or outside or within 20 miles, then it's probably a position that we need here pretty quickly. And when we're looking at it, do we want them living farther than 20 miles out?
So you do want officers to move?
No, but I think that, one, we have a city code that says they have to respond to an emergency within 30 minutes. So they have to
So
be
let's
able
go
to
around
get
the
there.
table. Who agrees that it should be less than 20 miles?
If we could just, if I could
Let me
finish
just
my
finish.
questioning.
Let's just do this.
Sure.
Who agrees that it should be less than 20 miles?
I do, and I want to
Okay.
add one more thing. And we're talking about 20 miles to the city limits, not necessarily 20 miles to where they're going.
Sure.
And so it will be different. So just say, for instance, and I think you made a good point, is we don't know what those dots are. And I think we should. And so say from that dot is that, and they need to come to Southwest Fort Worth, we're not talking about 20 miles. We're probably talking about 40 and 50 miles. So I think that's something that I'm looking at. I'm not just looking at the city of Fort Worth, I'm looking at the city limits. So before they get into Fort Worth, it's 20 miles. Where they're going once they get into Fort Worth, Bob Bowling is on the South Fort Worth. So if they're going into work, or if they're going to my district, that's an additional. So that's why I think, that's my.
And I couldn't agree more. I think I would feel differently about this discussion if we ultimately are going to have to vote on this policy. This body will not vote on this. This is a city management policy. And I know each of us spent a lot of time with with David, with Jess, with chiefs to make sure they understand where Elizabeth stands, where Chris stands. And I think this feedback is very helpful. I just don't want to belabor the conversation if ultimately we don't have a vote on this, Elizabeth.
Sure, I don't think it's belaboring. There are some points that I have to make on this policy, and I don't think that it's been handled the right way. We're a year out. So I asked for this data in June of last year. So 12 months later, we got a 6-month update. And I appreciate all of the work that staff did on that 6-month unpaid, because what we learned is that we were really doing a lot of things wrong. What is insulting to me as a council person is that 6 months later, we've come back and we don't have a final recommendation from PD. What we're hearing is, well, we've got a buffer set up, but we still need to go back and look at the positions. And I have some real heartburn about that, because I don't know that it has been as, PD specifically, has been as cooperative. And unfortunately, you're really the only department that we're dealing with this. Fire's got one outside of that 20-mile radius, and I think the same policy should apply to them as it applies to PD. But now we're coming back 6 months later when we knew that this was coming to the table. And it's, well, now we have to go back and look at positions. 9 civilians, a retired officer had a take-home vehicle, Fort Worth PD. Someone at the auto pound had a take-home vehicle, Fort Worth PD.
I don't
A
think
budget
anybody
analyst had a
yeah.
take-home vehicle, PD. So what I think is happening is that instead of looking about how we can actually be good stewards of our tax dollars and really make some comprehensive changes to the policy, we've come back and you've given us a policy that just codifies what we were doing. And the last thing that I want to say on this, because I think it is very important, and I'm so glad that you brought that up, Charlie, is that, you know, the idea of it being a perk, and Chief talking about, you know, how we use that in our recruitment and our retention. And I'm pretty sure that perks are not allowed in this city. And I'd like legal's opinion on as to whether or not perks are gifts of public funds. Because we have 8,000, we have 8,000 city employees. And so for them to, for anyone to say, well, we don't want to give these cars away because it's a morale issue, because it doesn't make them feel supported. How many general employees are sitting in this right now, in this room, or watching on TV? What does it do to their morale?
How
Why
many are
don't
asked to
they
put their
get that?
life on the line every single day, Elizabeth? Come on
Since
now.
I have been here, sir, we have lost 2 employees in the line of duty for the city of Fort Worth. One of them was a TPW employee, and the other one was
No doubt. Are
a
they
public
asked every single day
Yes,
to put
they
a badge on
are.
and go to a domestic assault case or pull
So-
somebody over
So
who's
is it
who's
your
a domestic
position
felon?
that they should get a perk because they chose this
No, I think it's my
profession?
position that this should be as low on the priority list as a fireworks call. Like, this is ridiculous that we're even talking about this. Like, we're talking about 25 vehicles. Okay, Chief,
We're
my
talking
question would
about
be,
50.
what are you gonna spend that $45,000 extra that you're gonna get per year? That's a huge windfall,
Well,
right? $45,000 to you.
I'm
like-
sorry, Mr. Lauersdorf, but wasn't it you that sat at this table and said that when it came time for the budget, that we were gonna have to go line by line and see where we can cut? And if we can
Absolutely, and
reasonably
this would be the
cut
last place I'm
information.
gonna cut it. As long as
Well,
we're
that's
gonna
your
spend money on,
decision.
as a resident, I can see many other areas where I'd
So if
rather
you can
cut.
go
If
back
this
to
is the
your
last
residents
thing-
and justify driving to Pilot Point, then you're more than welcome to do
But
that.
for anybody
I
who's willing to
can't.
put their life on the line for our residents, hell yes, I can
Okay.
guarantee you
Well, good luck
our
with
residents
that.
will do that.
Good luck with that. That is not a good steward of our tax dollars.
$45,000,
That's
yeah,
right.
that's,
Ca-
yeah,
or
they're.
Chief Noakes, did you have something you wanted to
Yeah,
say? I'm sorry.
One thing, if I may respond, I did not say that we use take-home vehicles as recruitment and retention tools. We don't have any posters that say, join Fort PD and get a take-home vehicle. What I said, some officers may see that as something that gives them reason to stay, but if someone's staying just for the vehicle, we don't want them here for that.
Correct.
But it is something that adds to the total show of support for the
So, a
officers.
perk.
And if I could ask one question, you said we've lost 2, you said?
In the line of duty,
And who did you
since I
mention?
have been on council, we have lost a TPW employee and we have lost a public events. We have lost someone in PD and we have lost 2 firefighters. But the 2 employees that died on the job while conducting in the years that I have been here have not been from, thankfully, we have not lost any police officers, we have not lost any firefighters, but we have lost 2 employees. And my point is to say, well, these other employees don't, it is disrespectful to them.
But
And
that's
it's
not a
placing the
complaint to
appointment.
Chief Noakes.
It's not a
correct?
complaint.
That's
It's not a
But
complaint.
I
City
have to
management
address
sent
that,
feedback
Mayor.
to them.
It's
I have
not
to
a
address
complaint
that.
to you.
For your information, we lost an officer in the line of duty since you've been here. Sergeant John Jensen
Is he
died
with
of COVID, on
Okay.
duty injury. I was in Washington DC with many other members of the Fort Worth Police Department recently for Police Week to see his name etched on the wall. We have lost one. in your time as a council member
Watch your
for
tone.
the city of Fort Worth.
Watch your tone.
Maybe you should write that down.
Okay. Well, watch your tone with me. You'll be respectful, because I know that's very important
I
to you,
think
Chief.
Councilmember Beck,
goes
you
both
give
ways.
respect, you get respect, absolutely.
And
Okay, we
so
gotta
when
close
I
the
said one
conversation now.
officer, that was the officer that I was referring to, Chief.
Is there
just so
any
you
other,
know.
is there any other feedback that
So you
council
can
needs
write
to
that
give
down.
to
How about
CMO
that?
specific about this
Write that down.
policy? Councilmember Martinez.
I just have a question for Chief. Did you bring this before your advisory council? As this is something related to policy, I'd be really curious to and it's contentious, right? Really would like to see what they would have to say about this. Is that something you would consider?
I would absolutely consider that. The topics we've been bringing to them so far are topics they've requested to hear about. So we wanted to bring first the ones that they want to hear, but that's actually a great idea to have them take a look at this one as well. Thank you.
So my final question is, when can we expect the updated list of people who have them?
Would you pull the calendar back up, please, Jessica?
Yes.
I'm sorry, ACM McCacker.
You're fine.
So to make sure I'm clear, so we're in line with the
So
AR
CMO
E6,
approves September 1st.
we talking the 1st or the 9th for the policy to be approved by city manager's office?
September 1 is our goal.
September 1.
And so that's when we'll have the list of mission-critical positions?
Yes, ma'am, that will be part of the policy.
Mm-hmm.
And to be clear, I don't need to see who you consider mission critical. I think you can run your department. Sounds like Councilmember Beck would like a copy of that. Anybody else needs to provide it, just let you know, Chief. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have one more presentation. Let me pull back my agenda. Thank you. It is an overview of small area plan criteria selection. Eric Flatiger is here. We'll just do it. And then as a reminder to council, don't move after this. We've got to go back to executives. I know some of you have the meetings.
Okay, good afternoon again. As people are transitioning in and out, I'm just gonna kick it off by introducing Eric. I know it's been a long day. Before I call on Eric, I just wanted to remind the council that the focus on area plans is part of the expansion of some of the planning division's efforts in the Fort Worth Lab. These plans are meant to provide some enhanced planning at a micro level and to help bridge the gap between the longer-term comprehensive plan and the more specific neighborhood needs. And so these area plans will also work in tandem with or alongside other critical efforts like corridor planning, open space planning, similar efforts. And so Eric presented this criteria last month at the Neighborhood Quality and Revitalization Committee. There were no changes requested to the criteria at that time. Actually, the input we received from NQRC was, how can we accelerate your two-a-year schedule on these area plans? And so that was great feedback for us. So we're looking into how to do that for the fiscal year 25 budget. But with those comments in mind, I'll turn it over to Eric. Eric's one of our assistant directors in the Fort Worth Lab over the planning division.
Christiane, before you leave, I'm just curious, who's doing all of your presentations now out of Fort Worth Lab? Who's putting them together?
Oh, a mix of people,
You can
yeah,
tell a
staff
big
leadership
difference.
team.
They're doing
Oh,
a great job.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, I'll pass that along. Yeah,
Please
it's
do.
definitely a team effort. Thanks.
Mayor and Council, thank you for the opportunity to share with you what we're doing for planning sector plans. So first off, planning sector plans, we have not done as a city for a long time. It was back in the 90s. And they are more focused plans. You are well aware that we're underway with community engagement for the 2050 Comprehensive Plan. That is a plan for the entire city, and as such is a high-level sort of umbrella plan that includes a variety of other plans as well in it. Planning sector plans are going to be more focused. So we're looking at specific planning sector boundaries and all the activity, all the land uses, all of the infrastructure, et cetera, within those areas. So this gives us an opportunity to be more focused, to get into more detail, and then to use it as a way to help implement the broader policies that are embedded with the comprehensive plan. So we have 16 planning sectors in the city of Fort Worth. And they're listed here on the table to the left. They're also depicted on the map and with labels on them. The black outline is the boundaries of those areas. So what you'll see right away is that the colored areas that are the council districts overlap in different ways with the planning sector boundaries. So the planning sectors use logical boundaries. So, railroads and highways and water features and so forth. And it's a way of looking at the city in a sort of a more compartmentalized way so we can focus our attention on it. But you can see that many of the planning sectors have multiple council districts that overlap that boundary. The ones on the outside are bringing in the extraterritorial jurisdiction as well. We have jurisdiction to plan for that. We cannot zone out there, but that's nonetheless something we're planning for. So
Have these largely stayed the same, the boundaries of planning sectors for a while?
they have indeed. They've been the same for 20 years. Any adjustments that take place are because of our city boundary adjustments associated with it. So Christiane mentioned a couple of different planning layers, and that's what this chart is depicting. The comprehensive plan, as I said, is sort of broad, overarching. It's a policy document that helps the city make decisions about growth and development, also addresses a number of other things that the city does. And as we go down that list, functional plans are also citywide, similar to the comprehensive plan, but they're looking at a very specific function, whether that's water or wastewater or master thoroughfare plan. Those are examples of that. And they're updated or created at different ranges in time. So that's over on the right. So area plans is that third row. That's where that falls under. We've got a number of other area plans that we've done besides planning sectors. We've got vision plans for Lake Arlington, for instance, or Lake Worth. We've got the Northside Economic Development Strategy. We've got other types of plans that are in that category. And then implementation documents are where we get into the actual implementation of decision-making that the city is responsible for. So your zoning, your other kinds of specific implementation tools are what's located there. So for the purpose of looking at the planning sector plans and determining how we were going to go about doing that, we've had a number of discussions with city management and others, and what we've determined is that a very logical way to approach it is to look at the areas inside Loop 820 and outside Loop 820 because they're very similar in terms of their concerns, in terms of their opportunities. Outside of Loop 820, lots of fast growth, lots of infrastructure need. Inside Loop 820, the issues are a little bit different, tend to be more focused on equity or redevelopment opportunities. So we've looked at it that way, and we've actually targeted in terms of the criteria for inside Loop 820, we're focused on equity issues. Outside Loop 820, we're focused on development because we're trying to get ahead of all that rapid growth that we're having out there. So in terms of the criteria that we use to identify the planning sectors and determine which ones we were going to do first and how we were going to rank that order, this is a summary basically of a very large set of spreadsheets that went into great detail on a variety of different criteria. The criteria are the ones that are identified in the middle. They're grouped by demographic changes or access or land use and development. You'll notice that there are weighting numbers on the edges here. And you'll see that the criteria themselves are the same on both sides of this chart. So on the right, it's looking at outside Loop 820. That's a development focus. So we're trying to get ahead of that rapid development. So we are putting a higher weighting on the criteria that relate specifically to that. And we're at the same time lowering some of those equity criteria. Exactly the reverse for inside Loop 820, where we're heightening those equity-related issues and looking less so at rapid development. So all of that brings us to this. So this is the schedule of essentially the process of the planning for the sector. So we wanted to identify 2 planning sectors to start with and start working on those right away. The goal is then to cover all of the rest of the 16 planning sectors over time, doing 2 per year. Just based on, based on budget, based on staff resources, and just the ability to get through the planning effort, this seemed the most logical way for us to proceed. So based on the criteria that we showed you and sort of the ranking of that and the weighting, the first two that we would start on pretty much right away are southeast and far southwest. So again, southeast is that inside Loop 820 sector, far southwest is outside Loop 820. And we would follow that same process throughout until all of the planning sectors are covered. And that's how we propose to do that. The D numbers are your districts. So you can see where you have some coverage in those different planning sectors.
Councilmember Beck.
Yeah. For the Wedgwood, names matter and people get finicky or, sometimes their feelings hurt about what we call things. And I'm looking at the area that you've designated as Wedgwood, and it's D3, D6, D8, and D9. And that's much larger than the proper Wedgwood area. And I think it would be beneficial if, just for semantics, we broadened that name of that particular area, just so when we're advertising for it or we're talking about it, people understand where they belong in that particular sector.
So just changing the name to bring in surrounding areas as well?
Yeah. So you have it titled as Wedgwood, but the area that it covers is much larger than Wedgwood. And so I think that it would be beneficial if, for semantics, we broaden that. So those folks that aren't in Wedgwood proper also understand that they're part of this particular group.
Well, we can certainly look at that and see if there's a way to make it more inclusive for the areas that are actually inside that boundary. Thank you. Okay, so this is the final results of all of the criteria, the analysis that went into it, the mapping, the GIS work, and so forth. So this is depicting in the map form the rounds. So first round 2026, and then sort of every year we'd be rolling down that legend list there. The dark color that you see, 2026, again, southeast and far southwest. So the second round would be the darker purple color, north side, far south, and so on. You can see sort of scheduling how that lays out in map form. And then on the left is just the council districts and then the rounds of planning effort where those districts would fall. And again, you'll fall within multiple planning sector plans. So you'll get a lot of opportunity to be active in this process. Our proposed schedule, and this is really focused on the first round, is just starting up in the fall, setting the stage, and then in the winter, working on the community vision, identifying community's priorities and so forth. It will also entail community engagement, just as the comprehensive plan is entailing community engagement. And for the first round, we have the opportunity to sort of overlay those activities to some degree. And then we'll be moving on to creating places, and this gets at essentially implementing the future land use planning perspective of place types on a sector by sector basis. So we get more opportunity to look at it in more detail. And then we'll move on to implementation strategy and then public review. So we have a budget, and we're sort of revisiting that right now for just the first round. And this is our schedule. So we're targeting really the end of June for your last eligible meeting for an M&C to authorize a contract with essentially the consultants that we're using right now for the comprehensive plan for that effort. So that's what's immediately in front of you. And then we'll just start the process of the planning and pre-planning for this afterwards. I'd be happy to take any questions or comments.
Any questions from staff? From council, sorry. Councilmember Bibbins? Go ahead.
So the consultant team that we have in place right now for the 2050 comprehensive plan includes Public Information Associates, also known as PIA, and MIG is our planning and urban design focused consultant. PIA is really focused on community engagement. That's their specialty. So that same group we would use for the first planning sector round, and we would essentially, because of the activity, MIG would be doing a little bit more than PIA on that one, as opposed to right now, they're sort of half and half.
Can you send me a bio brief on them, just so I know who we're dealing with?
Yes, ma'am.
And thank you for all you've done.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions, council? Thank you. That's the last of our presentations. Thank you, Eric.
Thank
Are
you.
there any future agenda items for City Manager Cook? Macy?
Yes. I have a list. And it's mostly regarding animal control. I want an update on the current spay and neuter ordinances, including citation fees for noncompliance, a report on the new managed intake program, current live release rate, a report on how medical records are maintained on animals in the shelter care, policy and procedures on how animals are assessed and treated and euthanized. I would like to know what other cities are the leaders in shelter best practices that we can compare ourselves to and their live release rates.
Thank you. Councilmember Martinez?
I'd like to look into limiting the number of sex offenders that can reside in a single-family home. This, of course, would not include halfway houses.
I got a
Councilmember
question. I just want to confirm that the minimum wage increase is going to be on the budget, the special call budget workshop? Because it, yes.
I hear yes. June
Okay.
18th, actually, so back
All
here,
right,
yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else? No? Okay. Meeting adjourned. Stay put. We've got one more executive session.